Everyone, welcome to the fourth webinar in the Jare Trading Psychology Masterclass. Once again, thanks so much for joining us on this Saturday as we kind of enter the home stretch here. Just a quick few reminders here. As usual, please leave any questions you have down below in the Q&A section. That just kind of helps keep everything organized. For general feedback, commentary, to talk amongst yourselves with other students, feel free to use the chat. This is being recorded, so feel free to take a step away if you need to, and you can watch it back in the course as many times as you wish. With that said, I think that's pretty much it. And yeah, really excited for this one. Routines as well as goal setting. A lot of practical advice here and answering a lot of your questions here today. So with that, Jared, I'll hand it over to you.
Oh man, spoiler alert! Richard, come on, you gotta.
I was excited.
Well, listen, yeah, I know, it's good stuff. I'm just messing with you. So yeah, listen, welcome back everybody. As Richard said, we're kind of in the home stretch here, and it's kind of crazy to say like that we're in webinar 4. It's kind of wild. 6 weeks later. So my mind kind of goes in two directions with this. Like, holy crap! Like, how do we get here already? But at the same time, I look back and I see how much we've actually accomplished over the last 6 weeks, and it's great. I can see progression for many of you. The depth of questioning. The depth of the work that's coming back is really continuing to progress in lots of ways. So, I think we've made things a little bit more efficient during the last webinar in terms of organization of questions that come in. So by all means, you can keep posting your questions throughout the webinar today. But we've also, kind of elicited a lot of your questions in advance, and I'm going to kind of structure answering them in a bit more of a pragmatic way today as well. All right. You all know this was coming. So here we are. Richard's going to post the link to today's test in the chat. And I will say that, last test was a little bit harder, for sure, which I think resulted in a bit lower scores. Today's test is going to be slightly different, and it's really going to require that you are honest on your end. Okay. So brutal honesty, where you're at, because it's going to help me to kind of inform what I need to prioritize. All right. So I think the link is in the chat. Got 90 seconds on the clock, and let's start that now. All right, 46. All right, good enough to go through. All right, so really there's only a couple questions that were being scored here. Okay, the first 3 were really just a test to see how well you all are actually learning the materials that you're submitting. Okay, so can you accurately remember all the data from your maps? You got one person that said yes. It looks like the majority of you have some kind of blend of, kind of mostly or somewhat, and then a handful that are saying no. Can you accurately remember your methods of disruption and injecting logic statements? Okay, slightly higher here with yes. Mostly and somewhat kind of taking the cake here and a few no's. So look, I think it's fair to suggest why that's the case, right? There's a lot more data in the maps than there is in the methods of disruption and the injecting logic. So that's fair from a scale in terms of amount that you need to learn, but is it fair from what needs to happen? No. Can you accurately remember your strategic reminder? Can I actually write sentences or questions without punctuation errors? The answer is no. But many of you more said yes, and mostly somewhat. So all right. So like there's a good amount, right? Those of you that said no, right? You got a lot more work to do than the rest of you. But if you did not say yes, then you need to spend some time reviewing it, internalizing it. And it's not just about the memorization, right? I do want the memorization to happen so that it's sort of there quickly, but it really is about kind of internalizing the understanding of what it is that's occurring for you so that you can begin to see that, much more easily in real time. And yes, of course, for some of you, you can continue to have these materials in front of you while you're trading as points of reference, but that's going to be suboptimal in key moments, and it's certainly suboptimal for certain styles of trading. All right, what is not a key takeaway from the interim concept? Okay, progress isn't just about your best being better. You can also move your B and C game forward too. Correcting greed, fear, anger, and confidence and discipline problems is key to moving the back end of your interim forward. Some days, the key to making progress isn't perfection. It's just sucking less. All of those are correct. So those of you that thought that other ones were not, all those are part of the interim concept. Using an interim to catch a fish is debatable. It's my dad jokes showing up here. All right, scenario. You're making progress with your anger and fear overall. It's less intense and you're trading better. but you still have days where you're trading as poorly as you did at the start of the masterclass. What is a possible reason? Now, if you answer these individually as if it's a possible reason for you, I would understand that. But the correct answer is all of the above, because they're all possibilities for what can cause a kind of a lack of progress at that back end. So my main kind of purpose of making these a bit maybe easier to answer was sort of less about, you all getting them right, and more about you just reinforcing some key points about both the inchworm concept and what's required to make progress. All right, so let's move on to what we're going to do today. And first and foremost, I'm going to review examples of your updated maps and real-time strategies, mental hand histories, and of course, the new tool, the A to C game analysis. And then at the sort of tail end of today's presentation, I'm going to talk about your routines, right? And the importance of the routines as a way of kind of putting together a lot of the pieces of the puzzle that we've been focusing on for the last 6 weeks. And then finally, to refine your goals and a plan to achieve them, and introduce a new worksheet that will be part of the homework for next time. Okay, so once again, I failed to achieve the 2-hour mark last time, I think by about 20 minutes. I'm going to be aiming for it again today. I know, many of you wouldn't be upset by having the additional content, but again, I think for me, I'm trying to keep this as succinct as possible so it's less overwhelming to you. I know some of you are really kind of thriving with that, but others are maybe kind of lagging a little behind because there's just that much content to do, and the practicalities of your lives kind of get in the way. So today, to kind of make things a bit more efficient, I am going to be answering those questions that have come in, and so we're going to start with, I think, a very important question out of the gate here. Okay, and the question is, I'm not getting the picture of the course. I see bits and pieces, but I'm having trouble seeing how all the webinars, slides, and homework will improve our trading in the end. So I say this is a massively important question because I don't want any of you to finish this course wondering this very question. Okay, so first and foremost, right, the mental side of your trading mistakes is a very important thing to focus on, because very often, right, your repetitive mistakes, the ones that are the very costly errors that you're making that are recurring quite frequently, they are not caused by a lack of trading knowledge. Now, that's not to say that exclusively, right? There can be a blend in certainly many situations where, no, actually the answer is to get better at trading and to learn more and systematize your system better, or learn more about different indicators, or make some adjustments. But for the purposes of this masterclass and this webinar series, the mental connection to trading is profound, because you're not going to be able to solve some of those problems unless you deal with the greed, the fear, the anger issues, the confidence issues, the discipline issues that are really the thing that are driving those mistakes. So let's now kind of think about it. All right, so that's the reason why this series was created in the first place. But now let's look at the construction of the system in itself, right? So we started with the data collection worksheet. The data collection worksheet is to help you to pull out the real-time data that a problem is kind of going to happen, right? You're very good at recognizing patterns in the market. Well, now this is your chance to recognize patterns for yourself. Once you do that, you then create a map that scales your emotional state, your mental state, in a way that helps you to identify those problems well in advance, so you can take action when your brain and your mind are still capable of taking action. Okay? Then from there, you're going to pull out line items of what's occurring, let's say at level 5, right, when your tilt is just now beginning to become problematic. What you put that into the mental hand history, and the mental hand history is designed to help you deeply analyze the cause of that emotional state, or those thought patterns, or those behavioral patterns, or those changes in your perception of the market, right? All of that is just what's happening on the surface, right? Those symptoms of what's going on, right? So sometimes you're going to find a lot of things on the surface, maybe several different areas. And when you dig down using the mental hand history, you're going to find the actual cause of the problem. Okay. Then once you do that, you're going to create an injecting logic statement that becomes part of your real-time strategy. And as part of that real-time strategy, we've got that updated map with your map on one side, or on the left-hand side, methods of disruption, and then the injecting logic statement with the strategic reminder at the top, right? So that is how all of these pieces fit together, and they're, kind of a cohesive system that at the end of the day, it's going to require a lot of repetition. And many of you have been going through these cycles over the last several weeks where, and even sometimes with me emailing you back, right? Pushing forward, building more information, building more data in terms of those maps, digging deeper into them, and discovering new understandings of what is actually causing the problems that you're seeing, which are ultimately leading to the mistakes you're making. So again, if anybody has any lingering questions about the purpose of this course, what we're trying to accomplish, and how these things fit together, by all means, continue to post your questions as we go. Okay. So additional questions on the maps and the maps plus the real-time strategies. I'm struggling to put the maps into practice during the trading day. As a scalper that trades just the first hour or two, it's hard to move focus off of the charts during the day, but that also seems to be the time when I need to be looking at the maps in order to preempt any potential tilt behavior. So I was alluding to this a little bit during the test, right? So you really need to spend more time internalizing those maps and the corrections so that you don't rely on your memory to kind of pull yourself out. You can rely on your memory to recognize data points going on for yourself. That's one option. Option two is, for sure, do some kind of a preparation where you're reminding yourself of those markers ahead of time. The last one, which is purposefully disruptive, but if this is a real problem, right, then I think we would take it over the risk of you tilting and mistakes that would come as a result of that, which is setting some kind of a timer to go off 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, right? Some frequency. So that just gives you a point to take a step back. You look at your map, see where you stand. And like, if you're in a position, right, and you need 30 more seconds, take 30 more seconds. But if you have the opportunity to take a step back where it's not risky or too risky with your positions, then do that. But you've got to find a way to kind of interface with that map in a way, whether it's internalizing it or disrupting the momentum of your day to create the opportunity to look more closely. I cannot distinguish between the different emotions. They smash into a single feeling. I can't seem to put a name or a definition on it. That's okay. I care less about the specific categorization that I've made. There's hundreds of different emotions if you look online of, the sort of range of what people can experience. And at the end of the day, they're just a construct, right, to better understand what you're experiencing. But you don't have to do that in order to kind of work yourself through. What oftentimes happens, right, is, right, we might have sort of this frequency of anger and some lack of confidence, right? And if they blend together, do we care what you're experiencing, or do we care why you are experiencing that emotion? And it's certainly the latter. We care much more about why it is the case. So look, maybe over time you'll be able to distinguish them better, but if you can't right now, don't worry about it. My concern on this tool is how to follow this in real time. I guess we need to have it open during the trading sessions. And when we realize that we're in a state of mind described on the document, we need to act based on the methods and logic we have outlined. Yes, all of the above. Okay. We're supposed to come up with radically different real-time strategy maps when we revise them. So yes, if what you found is a radical departure from what you found before. So for example, sometimes some of you have found anger issues were actually the thing that occurred before fear, or greed was what happened before you might lose confidence. So if there is a radical departure like that, you can either create an entirely, two different maps. You can sort of scale them, as in like the anger is sort of levels 1 to 4, and then the fear is levels 5 through 10. Or if it's not actually so radically different, then no, you don't need to create something so dramatically different. You just need to make it sort of a small upgrade. Last question here before I get to a couple examples. The discipline level and technical changes is confusing to me. Is this a direct copy of the map I complete from my data collection? Yes, it is. Okay. Basically, what we did there was just kind of shove those two things together so that it would fit on one piece of paper, right? If we had maybe like a legal size paper, 8.5 by 14, then you could do both columns and, have everything. It's just, again, kind of finding a way to fit it into templates that, would make the most sense for you. All right, I see a couple questions have come in. Let me just try to get to those. Where would you focus a client who can trade consistently profitably in sim and eval when there's no profit potential but consistently chokes in live funded trading, similar to a brilliant player that consistently chokes in tournaments? I would focus them first and foremost on scaling in at a level that they can do, right? So sometimes the hurdle feels big, and especially if there's a lot of confidence that's been built up, you can sort of treat the sim as if it's actual trading, just like you can treat practice environments as real, competition when they're not. Okay, they're two different environments because you are different. So number one, scale in so you can actually gain experience. One of the biggest problems is staying in the sim for too long. You kind of build up this sort of comfort zone there, and then it becomes too big of a jump. It's almost like you're trying to jump over a larger creek, right? Then you can actually jump. We want to make it something that you can actually do. But I think more importantly, you really do need to understand what is getting triggered within the live market so that you can actually work on that when you're in the sim. So you're actually treating the sim as a way of rehearsing the corrections that you might make to yourself in the live market. Okay. So I just want to go through a few examples of some maps that have come through, again, just to kind of really kind of tighten this. So for me, I think I wanted to show this as another example. Number one, the strategic reminder is good in all three of these examples. You'll see in a second. But number two, you can see they've kind of taken off the numbers. It was sort of more important to them to create just 4 categories. There's clearly an escalation in each one, but it's not numbered, right? So I think that was kind of an interesting change here. And so this is what they had said, and I'll just kind of scroll through here so you can see there's one for fear, and there's one for confidence. Okay, this process makes a ton more sense after completing the maps by first writing down what emotion I was feeling in the map. I can now dig into the system to combat the wrong emotions. Your examples of injecting logic were extremely helpful. I started your book. Looking back, I will need to reread it, but with a notebook to copy down more. Okay, so again, I think, like I said, the maps are good, strategic reminders. The next thing that kind of came through here in terms of questions was, I have a ton of self-doubt. Okay, so where does the self-doubt fit into my maps, right? And so self-doubt is typically going to be experienced as a version of fear or some version of lacking confidence. Okay, anger is unlikely to produce self-doubt. In fact, it's going to be the opposite, where you're going to have this sort of self-justification and the lack of any kind of friction mentally or self-reflection of like what the heck you're doing might be wrong. Okay, so that's where we're going to look there. And then they also had a question, is the idea from a mental hand history standpoint to select an emotion or technical change in these maps and then dive deeper, right? Would there be an expectation to complete one of these at every level? It makes sense for me to create one for technical changes to obtain new rules. I'm having difficulty asking why and digging into my emotions. That's okay. Okay. I think when we look at the mental hand history last time, and you'll see that again more today, there is a lot of consistency where I think you all are kind of focusing more on the technical side of the sort of problem, right, versus the mental side. And why does that make sense? Because you have way more technical knowledge than you do mental game knowledge. So you're using what you know. And so I'm going to keep pushing you and challenging you to be okay not knowing. Okay, I know that's a threatening idea. And if it is a threatening idea, then do a mental hand history about the threat of doing a mental hand history and not knowing what the answer is. Okay, so we can get a little meta here. But the point is, it's okay to not know. But if you focus too much on the technical, right, you're not going to get to the emotional side, which can be, ultimately the big driver of these mistakes. So is it an expectation that you do a mental hand history for every single level? No, it's not an expectation, but I would certainly challenge you to. I think you'll see in some of the other examples I'll go through today that, sometimes I see the gold, like where the biggest opportunity for, kind of a breakthrough comes in analyzing, let's say, levels 8 through 10, right? Where the problem is the biggest. Sometimes I get excited when a client's, having a bigger problem, not because I want them to suffer, but because I know that we're probably likely going to find some really good information. Okay. And so sometimes that is true. Sometimes it's just like so overwhelming that it's actually not really useful. Right. And the gold is kind of found in levels, 4 through 6 or 4 through 7. Okay. It is typically unlikely that you're going to find the deepest part of the problem in levels 1 through 3. Okay. So I'm just kind of pointing that out as a reference point, but listen, you're doing a good job with the mapping part, and just kind of keep it up here. Okay. I wanted to also show this one here. I think this is, I think this is cool because they actually broke up fear into four different categories of fear. I'm only showing three of them. So here's FOMO, here's a fear of mistakes, and here's a fear of losing. And if you look at these, you'd have to pause in the future, but there's very distinct levels for each one of these. And I think this is very well done. Now, what I will say is that with these maps, right, and this is the map plus the real-time strategy, the strategic reminder and injecting logic statements are getting a little bit blurry, okay? And so why does it matter? It matters in terms of sequencing, okay? You need to first stabilize your emotions, and then, right, the logic in terms of some of the technical side, right, the reminder from the technical side will have something that it can actually use to be a bit more potent, okay? So what I saw here in these examples, the strategic reminder is really kind of more of a longer injecting logic statement, right? And sometimes some of these injecting logic were actually, I think, good examples of what could be a strategic reminder, right? The market will go without me many more times, and that's okay. I can only make money when the market presents itself. Like, those are good. Again, I think from an injecting logic standpoint, at levels 7 through 10, it really needs to be more deep, right? It's impossible not to miss something. Trading is not perfectionistic. That has some power at level 7 through 10, right? But in general, right, you want to be reminding yourself of those points from a strategic reminder standpoint. So I want to go through a couple more examples of the strategic reminder that I thought were quite good, okay? I think this is probably the thing that is still a bit fuzzy for some of you, and I want to make sure that we can nail that down. Okay, so here's a good example of a strategic reminder from a confidence standpoint. Fortune favors the prepared, decide what matters and do what counts. High quality setups result, 87% win rate. Remember the pain of excessive losses from pulling stops or thinking I'm smarter than the market. Honor myself and the stops in my system. Support, resistance, optimism, pessimism, all reflected in the technical analysis of the chart. Yeah, okay, so I'm sure some of you might argue there's some injecting logic-esque type things here, but it's predominantly more of a technically oriented way of thinking than it is trying to correct the mental problems that are here. Okay, missing a trade is okay. Cash is a position. The market's not going anywhere, and there will be plenty of opportunities. Chasing candles in a chop down the rabbit hole kind of market, right, because of a mistrade will keep me from calmly analyzing price action and finding the next opportunity. Okay, risk management is number one rule to survive in trading. Must follow buyback rules checklist to buy right, predefine acceptable losses, and cut losses quickly if trade goes the other direction. You can always buy back. Less is more. Protect costs. Okay, so you get some ideas. Now, a couple more examples here of ones that, again, I think are more injecting logic statements than they are technical. Hope is not a strategy. Take action rather than take flight. Confront your portfolio action. Right? If you have no plan, you will not last. Okay. Think of my objective I have laid out for myself, vision of myself as those professional traders as a role model. Look, these are all good ideas. Okay. I am applauding the precision with which you've defined ideas that are going to help you, right? We're just trying to create these clearer buckets to focus on the technical aspects on a regular basis. And then when your emotions rise to certain thresholds, right, you have injecting logic statements that will help you at those specific levels. Okay. And this last one is kind of more of a blend of between the two. I think it's, again, there's good stuff in here. I'm not debating that by any means. Okay. We'll take a look at a couple of questions here. I work full-time and trade part-time, so I have issues with all these documents and the way you can address them. Seems like that most people are trading full-time. No, actually, I don't think that most are trading full-time. I do think that probably the majority are. Maybe that's most. So, all right, fine. Yes, more people are trading full-time than not. But I think the issue is for you, right? Just like finding enough time to do this. So, in my opinion, if you're having enough issues that would bring you to a course like this, then maybe having a little bit less time to trade than you would normally in the short term to be able to work on these documents would be a choice that I would make if I was in your shoes, right? To be able to carve out the time so that you're investing in your mental game growth rather than kind of waiting until you have more time or finding smaller opportunities maybe while you're at your other job, if you can do that, or other kind of small pockets. And I'm sure there's a lot going on. I mean, I experience it as well, right? There's only so many things you can do in one day and you only have so much energy. Okay, so I know that there's a lot of work here. But the thing is, if you start with the map, right, you can immediately make some progress, right? So prioritize that. And then as you get more time, right, then work to start to dig in to what's happening. And, when you're on a walk, or when you're in places where you're just, have more time to just think, you could go back and think about your map and try to do some analysis as to why it is that these problems exist, right? Even if you don't get answers, at least just kind of keep it on your mind and keep kind of grinding on it. All right. If I took a trade during a valid setup and then got stopped out with emotions being triggered, is it necessary to do map collection based on this triggered emotion? Because this post feeling instead of a live feeling. I see. Because this is a post feeling instead of a live feeling when I entered the trade on day one. Hence, not sure if this counts as a mistake. Okay, so if you took a trade that's a valid setup and got stopped out with emotions being triggered, the emotions being triggered are problematic if they cause another mistake, or if they cause you to sort of lose accurate perception of what's going on in the market. If you just get triggered because you're pissed off that you lost, and then within 5 or 10 minutes, you're fine, I wouldn't really consider that to be something that would map. Maybe in the background, you could look deeper at terms of ways of maybe reducing your hatred of losing. But again, I don't know that that's ever going to go to zero. And so, yeah, I think I care a lot more about the emotions that cause problems than the emotions that you just experienced. Okay. So let's get to the next example here. And I'm going to apologize in advance that I get your name wrong. This is from Hess or Heese, Hease. If you're here, let's do some work live. If you're not, then I'll just provide some feedback for you.
And if you're here, go ahead and raise your hand. I'll actually search your name. Yeah, I'm not seeing him just yet, Jared. So I think we can just keep going.
Yeah, we'll just keep going. No worries. Okay, so strategic reminder here I thought was actually quite good. You can see, again, there's a little bit of kind of some procedural pieces here, again, which is fine. So we look at the levels here. The comment that you made was a fear of losing money prevents trading discipline. So I want to call this out so that there's no confusion for you and for others. If you are recognizing fear as being the cause of your discipline issues, then it's not a discipline problem, right? It's a fear problem. And we need to begin to kind of iron out the escalation of fear that's going to ultimately lead to a violation of discipline. Okay, so really, this should be a map of fear, right? Number two, method of disruption, right? Use price alerts to avoid premature exits. I think you've got to use that before the problems exist, because at level 2, right, you're saying whenever market volatility widens, I easily exit the market early for fear of losing in order to avoid losses. You've already made the mistake. So I think, this use price alerts to avoid premature exits should actually be almost a strategic reminder or something that you are focused on from the moment that you start trading, right? And then if that's not working, it suggests that the intensity of the fear is a lot greater at that point than you realize. And it could be just actually beginning to trade causes a significant amount of fear or anxiety or nervousness. And then you've got to work more pragmatically about what the heck is actually going on, right? And so is it some of the normal nerves that exist and that you're kind of thinking that they're bad? And so it becomes more of if you think anxiety is bad, you're going to create more anxiety for that reason. Okay. Number 2, is it just the intensity of the market and thinking that you should feel calm like everybody else, right? Well, then that's going to increase it even more. And then if it's a fear of losing money, well, then what are the early signs of that fear of losing money? Is it present right from the get-go and then gets bigger after market volatility widens? And if it's evident right from the get-go, then you need to be working to correct it right from the start. Okay. So when we look at your injecting logic statement, your mental hand history. Let's look a little bit more clearly here, because I think the injecting logic statements here are actually a bit more kind of technically oriented and not, again, getting at the deeper causality. All right, so describe the problem in detail. Whenever I enter the market, as long as the direction does not go in the expected direction and leads to a loss, I always feel uncomfortable and want to get out as soon as possible. I don't think, so why does it make sense? I don't think I have enough strength to bear losses. Okay, whenever I hear that, I get a little skeptical. I'm certain that some of you feel that way at times. Okay, but if you're somebody who is believing that it's more of a discipline issue than a fear issue, then you're likely not accounting for the fact that your emotions have the power to like run over that discipline. And so it's going to feel like you're weak, but you're not like kind of accounting for the realities of the brain and how the emotional system will become overactive and make you feel, quite weak. So let's scratch that as a possibility here. Okay. It's likely that when I first entered the trading field, I was engaged in intraday trading. At the time, I didn't pay attention to fund management, which led to losses. In addition, the winning rate of the operating system was only 30-40%. Confidence in the trading system and confidence in my own judgment. Okay, so what's flawed? Although I know losing is part of trading, I also know that even with a 40% win rate, trading can still make money. But I don't pay attention to it like that. I can't fully accept this concept. I always feel that I have spent so much time and money learning to trade. Entering the market is to make money. I can't accept a losing trade. There's a lot of you that kind of end up in this spot where there's a recognition of a lack of acceptance of certain elements of the realities of trading. Okay. I would strongly urge you to make that a new number one. Okay. I'm not going to do that in this example, but I'm sort of saying it generally because you want to figure out why it is that you're not accepting it, right? Because it could just be actually training it because yes, trading is very different environment than anything else. And you've not been experienced anything like this before. If a lot of the poker players that I work with that came into trading, they don't have to learn the realities and sort of the false feedback in the short term in terms of how you rate and measure your own performance and how to deal with the fluctuations that go on. You're used to work environments where feedback can be quite a lot more accurate. So if it's just about training, fine, then it is quote unquote like a lack of acceptance, but I would call that more a lack of learning. But if it's a lack of acceptance, right, you cannot force it when there is a presence of something that is going to violate that. For example, wishing that you could win at 80% or wishing that you could make easy money, right? Wishes are oftentimes the thing that we harbor in the back of our mind and are oftentimes evident in the motivations that we bring to the things that we do, okay? So you might have to look back at what was going on in the early days of trading. Right. But that wish is going to kind of prevent the acceptance from occurring because you're going to hold on to the idea that one day trading could be like that. OK. What's the correction that you came up with? Facts have proved that losses are part of the trading game. OK. So again, very logical and correct. It's difficult to avoid losses in trading. If you cannot accept losses, it's like waiting to play the game of trading, but you are unwilling to understand how the game is played and the rules of the game. Okay, subjective expectations cannot replace objective facts. This is why that correction is correct. Losses are part of trading, but it does not mean that losses will have dire consequences. So look, this is very well done. If you want to go deeper, this is what I suggest. I know that losing is part of trading, but I can't accept a losing trade. I can't fully accept that even with a 40% win rate, I can still make money trading. And of course, actually, I did do what I said I wasn't. So here we go. So that's how you'd want to dig deeper in this case. All right. Okay, so this example comes from somebody who I had on last time. Okay, and so there were a couple things that were still problematic here. And number one, what he mentioned was that he's having problems following the method of disruption after getting stopped out. Okay, and so I wanted to call this out because it is an example that I think is going to happen to some of you, which is that you're going to try to actually disrupt the momentum of the pattern and you're just going to get steamrolled. And so then you have no opportunity to actually follow it. So what we want to do in those moments is to kind of peer into what is happening when you are kind of fighting to disrupt and are not actually able to do that. And so as he described, there's a pause in my mind where I think I should re-enter, maybe double my size. Was it just a stop run? And the set is still good? All of these thoughts automatically kick in like a devil is on my shoulder saying, yeah, do it, get back in, add a couple extra contracts or two, swing for the fences. I'm certain that many of you experience things very, very similar to that, right? And so again, I'm calling this out because as we've kind of progressed here, right, there's a peering in, right? That's getting more and more precise. So if you're having difficulty executing the strategy, don't just take that as a failing on your own. Take the feedback that is, okay, why am I having trouble in this spot? Let me look closer at it, okay? The system is designed in a very practical way. And if you're having a problem with any part of it, that suggests that that is an opportunity for you to go deeper and to explore what the heck is going on. And so that's what we did, okay? So here was the mental hand history that he had provided, okay? After a loss, I want to get back into a trade as soon as possible. I enter attack mode in which my trading rules and entry doesn't matter anymore. I can't stand the lack of success. The failure is unacceptable, and I don't understand what I have to do to make it work. Just one win, and I will feel better. The loss feels like criticism, like I'm being challenged. I think I'm always right or want to prove I'm right. Trading directly challenges that and makes me feel like my sense of worth is at stake. Nobody likes to be wrong, and I want to feel good about seeing my P&L up on the day and would do almost anything to see that happen. Taking a loss is the market telling me I'm wrong, and I want to prove to myself that I'm not dumb or stupid and can be right. The only way is to keep trading until I do something right. Eventually, I have to be. Okay, why is that logic flawed? Taking a loss does not prove that I'm dumb or stupid. It means I either let my emotions get the best of me or did not execute according to my strategy and trade criteria. Why is that correct? What's the correction here? I'm not dumb, but my emotions can make me feel dumb or stupid, causing me to execute poorly. Okay, couldn't have said it better myself. You're not stupid. You've just become taken over by the emotions. Focus on the trade criteria and discipline timer and update your journal. Okay, so this is good. And so I wanted to just kind of challenge him a bit more to see if we could get a bit deeper. Okay, and so this is what I would call out. Okay, I want to immediately prove to myself that I'm not dumb or stupid. That's what's happening in that moment, right? When you're unable to disrupt that momentum, it's because there's an immediate need to prove that you're not dumb. Okay. And so if we add that immediacy in here, then this, right? Why is that logic flawed? It's flawed because to prove that I'm not dumb, I'll do something dumb, right? That's in essence what's happening in that moment. So I'm just adding this as a bit of suggestions here and ways you can kind of, break it down a little bit more. But over the overall idea here is to be able to look at any issues you're having in following the system, following the strategy, not as a personal failing. Okay, I promise you, there's nothing that you're doing that is you are the reason for why you're struggling. Right? It's that there's something more for you to learn. Right, that needs to be kind of burned into your brain because it's really kind of the only way that we can analyze this effectively. All right. Let me get to a couple questions here before we go into the A to C game analysis. I started to feel that my technical game also needs to improve as I am doing the mental game exercise. I will be able to leverage the mental game work already done. Will I be able to leverage the mental game work already done, or will I need to redo the mental game exercises once I do more technical work? I'm not sure, to be honest. I could see it happening in either direction. Certainly, if you make a lot of progress technically and the issues that you then experience are wildly different, which can happen, I would be pretty happy about that personally, right? Because if it took working on your mental game to realize that you actually needed to work on your technical game, then great, then it served its purpose, right? This is hard. So don't feel like any of your work is worthless unless you're just not actually trying very hard. Okay, got to differentiate between lack of confidence versus the lack of confidence internally versus lack of confidence in the market, trading more cautiously because of volatile markets. Very good question. So the only way to do that successfully is to understand your own lack of confidence, right? So you want to have a detailed map of what that looks like when you are not feeling confident and distinguish it with certain thoughts that will come up, certain physical signals, basically all the mapping, all the data collection, right? If you have it clear, A. B, if you understand some of the flaws that are influencing your lack of confidence. If you have a good understanding of that, then when you look at a lack of confidence that might be related to what's going on in the market, you have a way of kind of asking yourself questions like, is it me in sort of this criteria? And if it's not, well, what am I experiencing? Right? And if what you're experiencing is wildly different, then I think in the short term, you can assume that it's probably more market driven than it is personal or related to your own confidence. That doesn't mean that it is, right? Because you would always have maybe different dimensions of your confidence that may come up, but that would be how I would start it. I find it hard to be consistent on the spreadsheet. It's like lifting massive weight, kind of sabotaging myself. However, it does work when I am inspired to write. So we're going to get to goals. And when you use the word inspiration, that suggests to me that you're looking for this work to be easy, right? Because inspiration, right, is like easy energy to get you to do what you need. So looking more at your C game and finding a way to suck less, right? So, right, the consistency might not be doing your spreadsheet perfectly, maybe for every trade or for every day, but it's like, what can you do at a minimum level that prevents you from having there be nothing, right? It's far better for you to focus on it for 1 minute a day than to focus on it 10 minutes once a week or 10 minutes every third day, right? The consistency to sort of suck less in your engagement is really important. You're not sabotaging yourself. You're just probably looking for the easy way out. She was asking if strategic reminder can be injecting logic. No, those are two separate things. They're obviously related, but they are two separate things. Bunch of questions coming in. There's lots of good stuff here. Let me get to the questions that are related to the A to C game analysis. So I want to kind of first call out that some of you really kind of took to this, and I want to provide some of the feedback that was kind of positive in here. So number one, it's tough to stay in A game consistently. Okay. Preview of next webinar, I'm going to talk a little bit more about how to get in your A game more consistently. So kind of we'll focus on that then. However, I'm solidly moving away from my C game and currently rate myself a B overall. That's progress. And I would call that progress for even being able to recognize that as progress. I think this is good to review pre and post market. I'm trying to suck less and then grading myself at the end of the day. Fantastic. Very helpful for identifying the actions I take in each of the A to C game states, which helps me quickly adjust my trading accordingly. So those are great, I think, kind of outcomes that we're looking for. Great ways that people are using this already. Okay, so questions. Was the A to C game analysis tied to all of our maps or just one part? So again, the maps are really your tool to better recognize when a mistake is about to happen. Okay, primary objective. Primary objective of the A to C game analysis is to rate your performance overall so you can create non-monetary, non-P&L ways of evaluating your performance, right? Because if you're only evaluating your performance based on your P&L, your confidence and your emotions are going to go along for the ride. But you can create stability in your emotional state by recognizing that you are operating, let's say, in your B game. Okay, and if you know that your B game generally is profitable, you're making pretty solid decisions, and you're getting crushed today, then that knowledge of how you performed should buffer some of the negative emotion that would come from those losses. Or on the flip side, if you're in your C game and you're making a lot of money, then that knowledge should buffer some of the excessive emotion that would come from winning a lot. Okay, so we're trying to create more consistency and balance. So how does the maps tie into this? Well, you can look at your maps of, let's say, anger or fear and see that, let's say, levels 1 to 4, 1 to 5 would be kind of part of your B game, and then levels 5 or 6 to 10 would be part of your C game, right? That's one way to do it. But we really need to get you to iron out, well, what does your A game look like? And I've asked a couple of times, right, for you to be focusing more on what that looks like so that you can have a better understanding of what it's like at your best, so you can know when it's actually happening. Okay, so that's generally how they're tied and the distinguishing features of it. How A to C game analysis differs from the mapping and mental hand history. Is this to be worked on at the correcting the problem stage only? No, you actually don't. I mean, look, I know I kind of mentioned it during the last webinar where I was focused a lot more on the mental hand history, but if you've gotten to this point and you haven't done a lot of the other exercises yet, you can start with the A to C game analysis. Sometimes in my client sessions, the first thing we do is the A to C game analysis because I can see how much their emotions are tied to results. And I want to find out how much we can solve just from getting them more stably or more consistently able to recognize their performance, right? So you do this to create some stability, and then you can find out, a more accurate representation of what's going on from a mapping standpoint. All right. So I want to just give two examples of A to C game analysis that I thought were quite good. And yeah, I may just kind of put this up here just for the sake of time, right? If you want to go back to these and look at them rather than reading a number of the examples. What I will say again, it's not essential, right, that there's a division between mental game and tactical skill, right? Mental game and the technical side of trading. It's far more important. And it's actually essential, right, that you have distinctions from A game, B game, and C game. So yes, I've been very firm about the sort of the blend of injecting logic and strategic reminder, right? That we need separate, okay? But here, as you're rating and describing the qualities that make up your A game, your B game, and your C game, I think you'll get much better depth in terms of precision around kind of the technical areas if you really focus on them independently, right? Which ultimately will help you to recognize your performance better. But if there's a blending of, kind of mental and technical, I'm far less concerned about it than I am with the strategic reminder and the injecting logic, okay? And I will say too, that if you go through this process, you're gonna find stuff that you can use for your strategic reminder, okay? And whether it's, a more aspirational, it's like, oh, okay, I found out what my A game looks like. Well, make that your strategic reminder and do that more often. Or if you want to make it more like kind of a defensive, like, all right, well, here's all the crap I want to avoid. We'll make sure I'm not doing that and make that part of your strategic reminder. Either way, right, you've got a way to kind of tease that out and make it a bit more efficient. Okay. Questions around the mental hand history. Number one, should I have multiple mental hand histories for each issue I struggle with? Confidence, fear, tilt. Yes. So I alluded to this a little bit earlier, right? So imagine, like actual territory, like, in one section, there's confidence, in one section, there's tilt, in one section, there's fear, right? The mental hand history is digging down below the ground to see what is causing, right, what we're seeing on the surface in each one of those areas. Sometimes, right, by digging in those three spots, you're going to find different things, right? You're going to find different flaws. So that's why you need to do this. At other times, you're going to find actually they all kind of congregate and are caused by one single flaw. For example, right, having your emotions be too much tied to results, right, can cause all of these problems, right? So, but you're not going to know that unless you do mental hand histories for all of them. In step 5, why is that correction correct? Is this to double confirm? Should we do the answers as trial and errors? It's not just about double confirmation. I have just found that when somebody is forced to explain why that correction makes sense, right, it just brings out more information, and you find other details, and you've seen it, right, and you'll continue to see it in the examples I provide, right? There is something more that's being added, so it's not just about the double confirmation. It's actually about trying to find deeper, richer information that is going to help create potency for the correction, because those deeper flaws, illusions, biases, they're not going to go away easily. So we need as much information as we can to help kind of fight against them. And so that's why that step is there. If level 1 is extreme underconfidence and 9 is extreme overconfidence, how do we do a mental hand history for level 5, stable or peak confidence? You don't. Okay, you don't have to worry about that. We're not looking to analyze the cause of your ideal performance, right? As I said, maybe in the next webinar, you're going to learn more about the factors that help to produce your A game and look at it, more pragmatically like that. But we're not. There's no mental hand history is to analyze the problems. If there's not a problem, you don't need to use it. Should I do a mental hand history anytime a new problem arises? Yes. Okay. Let me get through a couple questions from you all here. Let's see. My issue, as I constantly see or assume, haven't done any of the homework, time constraints, and need to see multiple times are due to discipline. Follow rule or lack of rule, tiredness. Should I focus more on the rules or discipline? I mean, you need energy in order to be disciplined, right? If I'm exhausted and I go to the gym and try to lift the same amount of weight that I would be, when I'm normally, I'm probably going to get injured. So if you're forcing yourself to be as disciplined as you want at a time when you're exhausted or really tired, then I would actually look at better ways that you can recover from your full-time job before you go trade. So it might mean that you have to trade less, but if you trade at a higher level, then you're going to actually perhaps have better results. But more importantly, for our purposes, you're going to perform better, which means you're learning better, which means you're progressing. So, maybe it feels, unreasonable to take an hour break between those two or to do something, more aggressive. But if that's what's necessary, that's what's necessary. Okay. This is from Jeff. I've been using the course to help me focus on improving my intuition. And so far I found it helpful in just being aware and paying attention to when it happens, i.e. listening. But I'm struggling to actually figure out the proper logic to inject and use this intuition to push my edge in trading. Any ideas? I mean, I think at this point, you want to be doing a mental hand history for why you're not actually trusting this sort of new intuition. Now, it could be just that it's new yet and you haven't proven to yourself realistically that it's something that you can actually use to profit, right? And I say prove to yourself, like maybe intellectually you know it, but deep down, right, you still kind of have the habits of ignoring it. So I would focus kind of more on a mental hand history around that first to better understand exactly why. Jared, how would you address those thoughts that randomly pop in my head? They say, you can't do this. You have too many green days in a row. You will lose. You're doing too good. You can't succeed. Do you really think you really can trade? I'm automatically injecting you are not your thoughts after these thoughts arise. Okay. So number one, this is a confidence issue. And we don't know how deep the confidence issue goes. But what I've experienced with a lot of clients is that when you have, kind of periods of success, that you can kind of like outrun or get too big from a perceptual standpoint. And so then it feels like you're kind of like undermining yourself here, right, with those thoughts. But it really has to do with having the base of your confidence expand to make what you're experiencing feel more normal, right? The fact that it feels so out of this realm is almost like your base is a lot smaller than your results, and it feels unstable, like you're going to crash. Okay, so that's the causality of those emotions, of those thoughts, right? So you saying you are not your thoughts is like a nice start to distinguishing that these things aren't something that you have to believe. So well done there. But we need to get to the deeper causality, and so it's a confidence issue, and it could just be that you're actually trading better than you think you are at a deeper level, right? And your confidence needs to grow and expand to believe that you're actually capable of that. I'm clear about my emotional patterns and mistakes. I wrote down the strategic reminders, injecting logics, and I know what I'm supposed to do. But in real-time trading, I just continue the old way of thinking and repeat the same mistakes. It seems like it's so hard to change a bad habit and can't control my own mind. I'm struggling to fight with myself. So I'm going to talk again about accumulated emotion, but it's almost certain that that is the case. And I'm also going to talk about a kind of a more extreme example of that. In a bit. All right. So we're moving along here. I'm going to go into some of the mental hand histories here. So this is for Jason. Jason, if you're on, let's get you in here and we'll talk a bit here.
Okay, I'm up.
Hey, welcome. Thank you.
How's it going?
Going well. Listen, this is a fantastic map here. I wanted to call it out just for that reason alone. I love the graphics that are in here. Obviously, the color coding. There's some, I know a few others that have done something similar, but this is really well done.
Yeah, I did take inspiration from some of the other examples last couple weeks ago.
Listen, everybody's helping each other here. That's great.
There you go.
So now you did a mental hand history for each of the 6 levels. And you said that for you, it's possible to go from kind of +3, where you're wildly overconfident, to -2 in fairly quick succession, as identified in your map here.
Yes.
Now, so I kind of mentioned this before, right? Sometimes when we do mental hand histories on the extremes, we'll find the gold there. Sometimes it's a little bit more, kind of solidly within the realm. Now, what I've done is pull up mental hand histories that are evidence of -2 and +2. So those are the two that I called out. Okay. And I think what we begin to see here is that there is some kind of overlap that's occurring, as if it's the same problem that's causing both. So let's just look at these together. Okay.
Yeah.
So describe the problem. I feel motivated and excited. So this is the overconfidence. I feel motivated and excited for all the money I'm making and I'm going to make. I could do this for a living. Imagining how the chart is going to play out. Changes in execution become bolder, an increasing number of trades outside my system, entering positions early, blah, blah, blah. Why does it make logical sense? I believe I can see the outcome of the trade when I enter and know it will be successful and will make a great amount of money. Okay. Why is it flawed? Despite every desire to, I'm able to see the actual future and having a high degree of confidence in the outcome is entirely misplaced. Great. What's the correction? Okay. So we lose a little bit of the thread here, right? You're only as good as your system. Stick to it, right? So here, I mean, it's okay to kind of reiterate things you've already found just in a more kind of directive manner. So it's like, what's the correction of that logic? You can't predict the future, period. So wait for setups to come to you and manage risk, right? That's how you're going to actually be successful. Let's look at the flip side, and then we're going to do one together here in a second. Feeling deflated. Okay. Lost my thread here. All right. So feeling deflated, typically in a bad run, exceeding a month with a notable drawdown, growing concern about whether I'll be able to make it back in the zone, getting hard on myself for taking bad trades or mismanaging risk. I've had a period with more losses than wins and taken a hit to my overall P&L. The system is more often not working for me, but I feel like I should be able to make money in any market. It's important to me that I make money, and I'm eager to quickly make up for it, the recent imbalance in my win-loss ratio, and get my account back to levels seen recently. Why is it flawed? The system that consistently make money in any market at any time does not exist. Okay, so yeah, logical, right? But it's more on the technical side of things. So let's actually do a revision based on this here. Okay, so the system is not working for me. So now we're just kind of moving what you wrote in step 2 up to step 1. The system is more often not working for me, but I feel like I should be able to make money in any market. Why does it make sense that you feel like you should make money in any market?
Well, I mean, I trade both directions. I'll go long and short. I tend to be wildly more profitable in my short trades. I'm at heart an optimist. So where I struggle is that in my short trades, my discipline and my risk management is laser focused. On my long trades, I get a little bit more, as you say, I'll justify reasons to kind of loosen my rules around the strategy and around the system, right? Tends to be the recurring theme of my technical execution anyway.
Okay. So again, to try to focus on the psychological side, I'm at heart an optimist and can become overconfident about my ability to precisely use my system in all markets. Is that fair?
Yep.
Okay.
That's
so
fair.
the reason I wanted to call this out is because we can find this word here. Okay. Overconfident. And yet here we are at level 2, lost confidence.
Mm-hmm.
So often, right, the cause of a lack of confidence is actually overconfidence and flaws that we more ascribed in that way. And so I think that if we were to kind of look back to what was here, right, and sort of this belief I can see the outcome of trades, it's almost like a version of that in here. What's the flaw here? It's like I believe like so much in my system that I'm blind to some of the ways that I incorrectly apply it. Something like that?
Yeah, that would, certainly in the ballpark, right?
Yeah.
I do believe in the system. I don't always follow it well. That's and that's more than the mental game side of my issues for sure.
Yeah. And so the question is like, why are you not following it? And maybe it's because there is almost like some kind of blind attachment to it where where it just needs to continue to evolve or kind of take shape. It needs to be just a bit more precise. What do you think? Still there?
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think of that?
I'm absorbing.
Okay. I understand.
Yeah.
All right, Jason. Good stuff, man. Well, by all means, if you want to, kind of keep working through this and send me something before next time, please do.
Sure thing.
All right.
All right. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for coming on. All right. So moving to the next one here. Okay. So let's just kind of read through this, and I'm looking at my time here. I'm going to go through this one, and then we're just going to kind of take a break here, and then I'll come back and continue to do some more mental hand histories, and then we'll get to the second half of the workshop here. All right. So number one, feeling deflated, typically in a bad run exceeding a month with a notable drawdown, growing concern about whether I'll be able to get back in the zone, getting hard on myself for taking bad trades, and or mismanaging risk. I've had periods with more losses than wins and taken a hit to my overall P&L. The system is more often not working for me, but I feel like I should be able to make money. Oh, what am I doing? I'm reading the same one. My bad, y'all. Okay. Next one. All right. So I'm pretty sure what I'm doing is right. I feel that taking a bit more volume a little early will make a larger profit. I tell myself I want larger size now. Largest now is a good time. I know that I will make more if I have a larger position. Okay. Why is that logic flawed? You only make more money if it's a good time to have a position. I know I want to size up, but I want all positions, not just some of them. It's silly that I must be down in the day to take a larger position. It's not a good time to size up. Risk management wise, I should be trading smaller since I'm wrong about the market. Okay. So again, feels very logical to me. It's just getting a little bit more technical than I would prefer. And so we look at in step 4, and there's now something that we can use. I have traded this position different than normal. I only took size to make my money back quickly. Some days we'll be down. It's unavoidable. So we got to just move that up to step 1, right? If we're going to get into the psychological side, right, that is what has to be the primary kind of focus. And so I did send this back to him. And so here were the answers that came back. Why does it make logical sense? Right? I spent a lot of time telling myself if I had larger side, I would make more money. So if I lose a bit more than I intended, then I would want to make it back quicker. Right? Makes sense. If the loss had never happened, I trade heavily in an attempt to make the loss disappear. Basically never to have happened in the first place. Only an idiot would let you get away from this. Like, right? Why is it flawed? Losses happen trying to make them back quickly. So I can't pretend, or I can pretend that it didn't happen, doesn't make them go away. I'm not an idiot because the trade doesn't go exactly to plan. There are a variety of outcomes, and some of them are outside of my intended levels. Size at the wrong time does more damage than good. Why is that logic flawed? Or what's the correction here? Except that the loss is outside my comfort zone, and I have and will always make back losses in due time. This process cannot be rushed. Otherwise, I will incur more losses. The next trade is uncorrelated to the last. Again, I think we're getting a little bit more kind of technical here. And so I would prefer there to be something related to, this sort of pretending that it didn't happen, or like attempting to make the loss disappear quickly, kind of back here in step 4, right? So something to the effect of, making the loss disappear is not going to, or making the loss disappear quickly is not going to make that happen, right? I'm going to create more losses as a result of that, right? I need to focus on execution, and something of that effect, I think is clear here. So, all right, let's pause here. You all can take a break. I will answer some of the questions that are in here, we'll come back in 7 minutes, right? So at 12:45 p.m. Eastern time, we'll come back. Okay, and for those of you that want to stick around, I will answer some of these questions. All right. I feel like I have some improvements in my C game, technical game. I feel it fixes some of my mental game issues as well. So my issue was with technical game rather than mental game. Yes, if that's the case. That doesn't mean that you don't have any mistakes from a mental game standpoint, because nobody's perfect. But yeah, I've worked with many traders for whom, improving themselves on a technical level is going to actually make their mental game a lot more stable. And that should make sense. All right. I've done my mental hand history and arrived to the conclusion that I may have a certain level of gambling addiction. I've done some investigation into that, took a few tests, and it seems that I have mild symptoms. I risk only what I can afford to lose. I work every single day on improving my mental game and my strategy. I'm able to follow my rules for prolonged periods, but then there are days where I just break my rules. Usually there are no trades according to my setups, but I enter anyway. Is there something to try first before looking into professional help? Yeah, so I think the fact that it's mild, gives me a little bit of hope that the system can help you here. And so as long as you are within that sort of sphere of, only losing what you can afford to, then I think it's worth the risk of kind of trying this first before looking for professional help. So number one, you've got to just become a bit more sensitive to what the changes in your mental state day to day, especially after you're making some money. And, what I'm going to suggest kind of later on today about your routines, I think is something that you really need to take very, very seriously. Your routine is going to be the way that you're going to protect yourself the most, because my guess is that there's not clear indications when you actually get into trading as to what's different day to day, and yet there is a difference. So it's the what you can observe kind of before the trading day begins, and maybe what you can do at the end of your trading day to kind of prevent some buildup of emotion. But for sure, you can better understand kind of why it is that you would break your rules in a mental hand history kind of way, and look at it kind of less connected to the math, right? So sometimes mental hand history is very, very specific in a line item kind of way related to your map. Sometimes mental hand history is just trying to get to a more kind of macro, bigger picture problem that's going on. And I think that's what's going on here. So the desire to break your rules on those days is probably like a bigger thing related to the gambling addiction, and that may kind of wormhole into some personal issues as well, or personal ways in which, like non-trading ways in which, this issue comes up as well. So those would be the things that I would suggest. And certainly if you have questions about the routine as I get to it, by all means. I can't differentiate if I'm in an A, B, or C game. How do I know if I'm at which game? Look, if you can't differentiate, you got to start with what you can. Okay. So, understanding what it's like at your worst, typically would be the starting point, right? Understanding what it's like at your best can be, a bit harder. So I would start with what is occurring at your worst. And if you're here, you likely know what your mistakes are. And if you know what your mistakes are, then you just look at what's going on mentally, emotionally, physically in your mind in terms of decision-making or technically when those mistakes are occurring and around that time. And so that will help you to begin to differentiate your C game. And then once you really kind of get that solidly in your mind, then it will become easier to differentiate between, kind of B game and A game. Okay. Need help with disruptions and how to implement them in real time. All right. So you got to post more details in terms of what you're struggling with in that regard. Okay. So in general, right, the disruptions need to be very clear. They need to be something that you can actually do. So if you can't do it at all, right, then we go back to the example I gave earlier, where the mental hand history, right, you got to start to break down exactly why it is difficult for that to occur, right? Sometimes it's actually just reviewing it and knowing what they are, right? Having the strategy be a lot more clear in your mind, almost rehearsing in a sense in your mind of what you're going to do when these things happen. And if you're trying to apply a method of disruption at a time when your emotions are bigger than you realize, that could be another reason for why, it's difficult to take that action. Look, it can be intense being in the market, right? And the idea that you want to have to step away and do something can be, the thing that kind of paralyzes you. So you might have some expectations, right, of staying in the market, being there, right, that are kind of driving you versus the desire to be improving your performance and having your performance be the thing that was leading you towards taking the actions that are going to be most helpful for you in that regard. Okay. You spoke about having the right amount of energy, but not all days are going to be the same due to various external factors. What would you suggest to do in days of tiredness or complacency? Will have a pre-market routine help? Yes, a pre-market routine will help. So on days where you're tired, sometimes that tiredness can be because there's just a lot on your mind. There's kind of this feeling of being overwhelmed, and so it's not actual physical fatigue. It's just an overwhelmed feeling or just a lot on your mind. So writing is actually a very important task, and just kind of like doing almost like a cool down for your life before you start to trade. Just get all that crap out of your head. That can kind of free up a little bit of mental space. Sometimes doing like a light meditation or like a short nap. Sometimes I actually like to just like right behind me, lie on my back on the floor. It's not comfortable. And so that's why I do it, because I'm not going to fall asleep for a long time there. Like I can just kind of like lay on the ground on my back. Right. So for me, it's just very, I wouldn't say like completely uncomfortable. I can do it. But I just close my eyes and, 5-10 minutes. And sometimes that can be enough. Right. I think a lot of times, especially in today's day and age, right, there's so much input coming in. Shut that off. Give your brain a chance to reset and relax. Some of the things I'm also mentioning in the routine section could help you here too, in the things that are going on in the rest of your life, right? To have enough energy for trading, you might need to be more precise, more efficient with how you're using your energy in the rest of your life. All right, I'm going to get to one more question and then we'll resume here. I start each day with some fear, anxiety prior to taking my first trade. The market is uncertain and I could have a winning or losing day. Seems logical why the anxiety exists due to the future uncertainty. I'm sure part of this baggage from past losses. In an odd way, this feeling prevents me from being overconfident and helps me minimize my losses, but hurts maximizing profits. The best competitive players seem to be very confident in their process versus having anxiety. Yes, I would agree with that, right? I think an anxiety that's going to prevent you from being able to maximize your profit is certainly not evidence of what's the best traders are able to do. But that doesn't mean necessarily that you can't kind of firmly solve this. I think the baggage from past losses I'm going to get to again shortly, I think is really kind of the X factor here. The threat of those still kind of being unresolved can significantly kind of spike your anxiety. And even though, you're probably a lot better of a trader, the mind has this strong association for the pain that you still feel from those losses, and being back in the market dealing with them can be, quite triggering for all that stuff. All right. So I hope everybody got a good break here. We're going to kind of plow through and see how efficient I can be. There's just a lot that I want to cover. So, I'll probably do a couple more mental histories and then go to that section on the accumulated emotion that I wanted to get to. All right. So let's see where we're at here. Okay. So I'm going to give you another example of kind of the reframing of, an example that gets a bit technical. Okay. So if you want to read through, go ahead and read through it. Just for time, I'm going to just assume, right, that we're starting with something that begins with like an impulse that is FOMO and greed. Okay. And then the analysis gets to be a bit more technical than is preferred, right? Actually, there is a lot of psychological stuff in here, but what I wanted to get to was this, okay? And this was written in step 3, okay? And so I just moved it back up to step 1 as a way of getting a bit deeper, okay? So I have underlying expectations about my ability and the results that I want. I'm fairly new and do not have the same trust level in my ability, my trading plan, a strategy, and do not have the same level of awareness of the current residual emotions, right, that impact my actions and behaviors. There's a lot to learn about trading and it takes time. Successful traders learn to trust their strategy, more accurately assess their performance results, and understand the probabilistic nature of trading. Okay, and so I asked for some an additional revision based on this, and here's what we got. Okay, I'm a type A person and have high expectations about what I can do. However, I lack experience and confidence in trading. There's a lot to learn, right? Both technically and mentally to be a highly profitable trader. I've been successful and confident in many areas of my life, so I have an underlying belief expectation that I could become a successful trader quickly. I had very little, almost no understanding about the significant impact of the mental and emotional states and underlying root causes on trading decisions. Okay, so what's the flaw here? I don't know what I don't know, right? And I'm more than capable of learning and progressing through the various levels of competency. I cannot know it all. It takes time to learn. I have not truly understood or embraced the complexities of trading. Okay, so again, we get to step 4, continue to collect data, use the tools, right, and rely on my mentors to keep moving forward. I love to learn, and trading gives me great opportunities to grow. So I think there's elements in what's in step 3 that could be used in step 4 too, right, just to make it a bit more robust. There's so much good stuff in step 2 and 3 that I feel like step 4 kind of falls a little bit flat. But I'm always curious, right, about how does it feel to just dig a bit deeper here. And this is what they said. I felt some surprise after writing and rewriting this version and landing on confidence. I was so focused on FOMO and greed and fear that it hadn't occurred to me that if I was truly confident, I would not make many of these lower quality trades. I will make mistakes. I'm human, not a robot. So cool. Throw that in to step 4. It certainly helps to kind of buffer this a little bit. There we are. This way. A couple quick examples of like kind of more ways to kind of point out some of the psychological pieces that are here. Okay, so I think deep down, I secretly hope, big indicator that there's something psychological, and that would become the new number 1. Another example, I think it's a combination of jealousy, competitiveness, scarcity level thinking, although I'm not sure I am associating my worth against his, right? So this is about jealousy and comparing to a friend that is doing well, okay? So yes, that would become the new number 1 as a way of digging deeper into the psychological side of this. Okay, I wanted to point this one out because it was just a small revision to the language that just made it a little more personal, right? So what's the trigger? What happened, right? So this is this description of the problem. Why did it make sense to react this way? So where's the problem thinking this way? But again, more adaptations, more creativity around how to use these tools, but was able to do them quite well. All right, so now this example starts to touch upon what I was alluding to before when I was describing some of the past pain points that get evident in your reactions, but may not necessarily be like kind of obvious to you, okay? So I jump into a trade before it completely sets up because I have unrealistic expectations of my abilities. So cool, right? Right out of the gate, right? There's a lot of psychological depth there. It really hurts to see all of those easy trades I should have taken in the past. If I don't get into the trade now, I miss it. It just adds more pain and really makes me feel less valuable as a person. I have to get it right this time because I don't want to beat myself up yet again for failing to do my job. I mean, you can just feel the scar tissue, feel the accumulated emotion, feel the past pain that is evident here. And so, look, you jump into trades before it completely sets up, not just because you have unrealistic expectations of your abilities, but because you have these past pain points that are causing you to have a significant amount of emotion produced, right? And then thus, it's just not a fair fight, okay? So again, I talked last time about these X factors that cause accumulated emotion, right? So this is a prime example of past losses, but all of those other 4 can be significant causes of that. So what happens when this stuff gets really deep, right? And so I think the mental hand history that I just described could actually probably be described as like trading trauma. Okay, so I'm purposely using the word trauma just because some of you are likely familiar with it, but I also want to kind of change maybe the feeling that you have about that word because it can make it feel very, very, kind of profound and big, and it doesn't have to be in all cases, okay? So trauma, right, as I would define it in a performance realm. So we're moving this away from trauma related to post-traumatic stress disorder, these massive, nasty things that can happen in life that really stick with us, okay? And we're just going to keep it within the performance sphere within trading. And this is something that happens to poker players and golfers, and in every performance environment, right? We can have bad performances that stick with us. And so I don't have a better word for it than to call it trauma. And so the marker for trauma in this regard is if you think back to those past mistakes, those past losses, right, whatever it is that you're still kind of hung up on, and you still feel the emotion today, just like you did in the past. That's how you know that there's trauma, or that's how you know that this accumulated emotion is really, really kind of locked up. And I almost kind of envision it like like the Jurassic Park, like insect in amber. It's like it is frozen, okay? And we can try to make this maybe a little bit more practical too by describing it or comparing it to physical pain or physical trauma, right? Like I actually had, early in my life, like some injuries to my pec muscle, my chest. And I think it was from overthrowing as a baseball player. I was a pitcher as a kid and loved to pitch, and just probably threw my arm out way too many times. They didn't have rules back then for how many pitches you should throw. And, I'm certain that there was some pain. Now, what happened is scar tissue formed. And so into my late teens, early 20s, I was having issues with this shoulder. The shoulder was kind of immobilized. I didn't have full range of motion. And so after doing some PT, we found that there was some scar tissue in there. And let me tell you, it was not fun to dig in there, right? Not me personally, but the therapist I was working with, dig in there and break apart that scar tissue so that I could regain the mobility and the function. The trauma from an emotional standpoint is kind of the same thing, right? So we have these past pain points and our mind tries to protect ourselves. And so we kind of encapsulate it and kind of hold it in place. And there's this belief in the world, not just in trading, that like time heals all wounds. Bullshit. Okay. Time does not heal all wounds, as those of you who've suffered from this can attest, right? And so if you're continuing to think about those past pain points in a very practical way, right? When you think back to the past and it's like, oh, I remember how I felt. That's not trauma. But if you still feel the emotion, right, then we've got to kind of go through a process to unlock it and actually heal it. Okay. And so one of the things we can do is to make like a slight revision to the mental hand history. Okay. And so this is, something that I did with, I'll give you one example of a client that I did this with. It's this, I'm laughing, but it's out of my own protection mechanism because it's just such a disgusting story. Right? Guy who had, I forget if it was 3 million or 30 million Doge coins, like 2019, kind of well before things broke up, or things blew up. And yeah, he sold all of it way too early. And then, of course, we're now dealing with the after effects of life-changing money, and especially from the country that he lived in, right? The ability to sell, not even near the top, just getting it to 10 cents would have been, life-changing money for him. And so the pain associated with that lingered. And so, this is a client that I've been working with for a while. We kind of get to it maybe like 6 months after the dust had settled, and there's like the pain and the trauma of like the actual time when things are blowing up and kind of just realizing what he had missed out on. There was the pain of like selling and when that occurred and for the amount. So revision of the mental hand history. Describe the most painful parts, right? So that becomes step one. Okay. Then as you like kind of fully unlock and kind of uncork this memory, really trying to get into the pain, right? You're beginning to get to dig in here. And the second step is to describe why it makes sense to you that you're still holding on to. Okay. It's my belief, and I'm not alone here. There are other therapists from the true trauma world that believe that we kind of hold on to these things because there's something for us to learn, right? And so we're holding on to it because there's not something that we fully understand yet about ourselves. And the client that I was mentioning, as it turns out, he had confidence issues that were really minor in the rest of his life, or at least ones that weren't really notable, but was exposed here. The life-changing money made him like feel like a failure, feel like he wasn't worthy, when actually that was something that he felt before he'd even bought Dogecoin. It was like something he had felt for years, but wasn't, again, really expressed. But as we kind of like line these two things up, all of a sudden it makes sense for a lot of the things that existed in his personal life. So that's what we kind of dug out. And it took a few sessions, but I can tell you, okay, I'm not saying that he's happy, right? That he sold of course he would have liked to have had it, but making all that money was not going to solve this psychological problem. You cannot solve a psychological problem like this with more money. That's why there's miserable millionaires out there. Okay. And he would have been one of them. Right? So yes, there is a resolution of the pain, and there's a sense of strength that came from being able to heal and improve his confidence, right? Digging through these pain points produced added strength. And so you can do the same thing, kind of walking through this. Now, I'm not saying this is easy. And for some of you, it might be overwhelming. So yes, if you feel like you need to consult with a professional, right, who somebody works in trauma, they don't have to understand trading. They just have to understand trauma, and they could help you kind of work through this. Here is a process that I use with some of my clients that I would say is kind of firmly in the category of they're sort of very strong in general, but they've got these things that are just like kind of lingering, and they just kind of can't get past it, can't get over it. Okay. So here's what we do. I'm going to walk you through these steps. And I would say that the idea of this overall is kind of like uncorking like a bottle of wine that's been, I forget the right word for it. I want to say marinating, but it's not marinating. You can tell I'm not a big wine drinker. Basically uncorking a bottle of wine that's been sitting around for 12 years, right? Like it needs to breathe before you can actually drink it. Otherwise it's going to be too acidic or whatever, it tastes bad. So that's what this process is about. Sorry. So here's how it works, and you can try it right now if you want. Okay. So step number 1, relax your mind and just kind of allow yourself to just drift back into the memory. Okay. Just take a few deep breaths and just slowly allow yourself to kind of float back and bring the memory up. We want to make you kind of dive back into it as if it was happening right now. Okay. Now, the second thing you're going to do, as you're, again, eyes closed, focusing on the memory, identify the most painful part. Okay. Now, sometimes the most painful part is like a visual. Sometimes it could be sound. Sometimes it's physical, right? Sometimes people will have like tension in their chest, or, something in their hands, or heat in their head. Like you can have sometimes physical experiences as you're diving yourself back into these old memories. Totally normal. And what you want to do is kind of isolate what is the painful part, right? Is it visual? Is it a sound? Is it something you said to yourself? Is it a physical sensation? And you want to make it bigger. Breathe into the pain. Make it a bigger part of your experience. Again, massaging scar tissue ain't fun, and this is not supposed to be fun either, okay? So now you're focusing on that most painful part, right? Making it a lot bigger, and now you want to ask yourself some questions and write down what comes to mind. Like, what is going on? Like, what is the most painful part? Describe what's happening. Why does it make sense that you're still holding on to it? Why does it make sense that this is still very painful? And you're going to begin kind of like a dialogue with yourself to try to extract more of these pain points out. Okay. And so sometimes the dialogue is like you write, and then you go back to step 1, relax your mind, go back to the memory, and then maybe like a different feature becomes the most painful part. Go through the process, write down what comes out, right? And you kind of keep doing this until you feel like you kind of, come to some kind of conclusion, or some kind of, not like a conclusion as an end, but as an end to like the bigger pain points, that like the visuals, the sensations have kind of changed a little bit. Yeah, and that's an indication that you can now then do a mental hand history. Okay. And so again, using the mental hand history as I described it before, so that you can then get to some corrections and really kind of work through this whole thing. Right? And so then the injecting logic statements that you find in steps 4 become something that you're preparing yourself for at the start of the trading day. Okay. Now I will say a very, very basic example of one would just be calling it out as being old. Okay. Sometimes, right, when you start to feel a lot of anxiety at the start of a trading session, or you start to feel like there's a lot of emotion coming up at any point, if you call it out as being old because you know that there is these old memories that are part of it, it can help to kind of become a more powerful disruptor to the momentum of that pattern. So calling it out as old is your way of changing your perception of what's happening in the moment. You're not quite as caught up in the emotion, quite as paralyzed in it. And again, that can be kind of helpful. I describe it as like, the emotion kind of overwhelms you. It's almost like being sucked underwater. And so you're just looking for a way to kind of get your head back above water so you can have a bit of objectivity and a bit more clarity on what to do. And so calling it out as old is a way of kind of doing that. And then, the injecting logic can kind of help take you that next step. So if there are any questions on that, I will get to them. Otherwise, we're going to work on putting all the pieces together. And those of you who are keenly aware of the time will recognize that we're going to go over again. So I'm sorry if those of you that need to kind of take off and leave us, in about 25 minutes. But we're going to, go over by a little bit, and I'll try to get to some questions. But if there are any questions on that process or anything else around the mental hand history, please, by all means, post them. Okay. So I see a question from Michael about the mental hand history, so I'll get to that. Would you say using step 3 of the mental hand history and putting it into step 1 of a new mental hand history is a good way to get deeper into the roots? Yeah, I'd say in general, yes. Especially if, you tend to be more kind of technically oriented. But if you want to get deeper, yeah, I mean, you kind of you're just kind of continuing to ask the why questions. Like any step, you can keep asking why until you feel like you get deep enough. The problem is sometimes you can dig so deep that you lose practicality when it comes to creating an injecting logic statement that's going to work in the moment, right? There's such a big departure. So what happens in that case is you can get deep enough that it will have like the logic will have an impact in the moment in real time when you're trading. But then you go deeper to kind of find the more kind of macro, bigger picture. And then you find injecting logic statements that can become part of your preparation, right? Or part of your cool down, right? As a way of kind of creating a cycle for a general understanding about what you're trying to correct. So is the idea to be aware of the trauma or to get rid of it? Good question. The solution is to get rid of it. We're trying to break apart the bonds of that emotion from the past, right? Emotion is not supposed to be stored that way. Okay. When you go back and think about a memory of the past, whether it's positive or negative, you can think about how you felt, but you don't actually feel how you felt unless it's a marker for trauma. Now, we could argue maybe some of the good feelings could, you'd want to have a good trauma. Sure, fine, right? But for the negative stuff, which is really problematic, yes, we want to get rid of it. All right, let's move on to putting all the pieces together. Okay, so really what we're getting at here is about upgrading your routines, okay? And so when we look at routines, for me, I focus mostly on these 3 elements. I think the 4th element, would just be kind of the practice and the work that you do kind of outside of these hours. And that's fine too. But for me right now, I want to focus on these 3. And so before we get too deep into this, if you could post in the chat, I'm kind of curious to know on your end, why do you think routines are so important? Okay. So just take a minute, think about why your routines are important. And, really kind of looking at the routines that exist in all performance environments, right? If you are, kind of paid based on your performance, then, it's not just about showing up, right? You need to be asking yourself, like, what does it take for me to be at my best, right? So here are some things coming in, right? Drive for consistency, right? Focuses the mind, right? Provides certainty, allows to be consistent, right? Analyze strengths and weaknesses. To inoculate or rinse, repeat the process consistently, gives me a plan of what to do, build mental muscle memory. Same reason pilot uses a checklist. Yeah, exactly. So you don't freaking crash. So it becomes automatic. Can't control the market, but I can control my routines. Yep. Be grounded, mindset. Yeah, there's a lot of, okay. So it's clear that you understand the value of the routines. Okay. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time going through, kind of each of these points from a technical standpoint. Actually, I'm not going to spend any time on that, frankly. I spoke with Richard about this. Like, I think things will get confusing. I'm only going to focus on each of these different phases from a mental standpoint. Okay. And certainly if you have questions about it from a technical standpoint, you can ask Richard or any of the guys at Trader Line. They will be happy to help you, kind of refine your routines. Okay. So if we're just focusing on the mental side, yeah, there's also like kind of a variety of schedules that you go through as well, right? I know sometimes, we're dealing with crypto markets and futures markets, and, you have jobs or family. There's a lot of kind of cycles that you all will go through that can make having a consistent routine challenging. However, it's essential that you do for the reasons that you mentioned. And in my mind, like the tip of the iceberg for why we do this is because it will help you to perform better, more consistently. And that's the name of the game here. Okay. So let's talk about pre-market warm-up. Okay. Just get a handful of ideas of what you can do here. Okay. Number one, review long-term goals. Now, why is it important to review long-term goals? Because when you begin trading, we want to narrow your focus, right? Which removes all of the focus on ancillary things outside of it, right? And so for you to be at your best, you want your focus to be concentrated on trading. And so viewing your long-term goals kind of gives you a bigger picture perspective on what the heck you are trying to accomplish in general, and then also today. Okay. So you're going to set goals or set tasks for the day, right? So, times where you're sitting on your hands, like you want to have very clear ideas of what you're doing during your trading hours, whether it's, from an outcome standpoint or a process standpoint. Be really clear, right? Think of focus like a flashlight. Like we want a very, very narrow beam. We don't want this sort of wide spectrum, covering a lot. It's just going to not allow you to be quite as clear as you want. Looks like I got things out of order. Next thing you do, review your mental game strategy. Maps, injecting logic, strategic reminders, right? We want to just refresh that stuff so it's top of your mind. Then, of course, you can do a mental check, right? Just ask yourself, how do I feel right? In B game, C game, a little emotional, feeling clear, feeling really good. I think one of the biggest things to look out for is a possible subtle problem is being overly optimistic. Okay, being overly optimistic sometimes can be a cause of not kind of overreacting when things go poorly. Like I want you to be really kind of sharply prepared to battle whatever's going to kind of face your way. And so if you find that you're a little bit emotionally off for some reason, let's say there's a little bit of a positive hangover from making a lot of money from the previous day, or the opposite, right? How are you going to adjust when you're not at 100% at the start? Right. So you might need to take a bit more time. You might need to go through a mental hand history. You might need to close your eyes, do some injecting logic statements, go for a walk, like reset whatever you got to do to try to reset yourself. Or it's like, no, you know what? I'm tired. I'm at 90% today. It's going to be a battle and it's going to be a dogfight. And I'm just going to do the absolute best I can. I'm going to take a bunch of breaks. I'm going to make sure that I'm really, really precise on my execution. And if anything gets off, right, I'm taking breaks. And so you become even kind of, I wouldn't say harsher, but just kind of like less tolerant of any imperfections in your performance. All right. Then from a post-market cool down standpoint, evaluate your performance. It should be the first thing you do. I mean, I think it's just very easy, and many of you don't have the ability to kind of turn off your P&L. And so, the actual kind of monetary results of the day are kind of ever present. But if you can, try to rate your performance first, because it will help to then contextualize the results from a P&L standpoint a little bit better. Number two, you can review your progress. Okay, so if we're looking from that inchworm apples to apples comparison kind of way, right? How did you perform based on the relative difficulty of this trading session, this day? How did you perform, right? And so you're looking for indications of progress. And if you're not seeing progress, right, then try to figure out why that is the case. Okay. And so writing in your journal, I think is a great tool. I'm a big advocate for writing in general. Those of you that know my work know that that's the case. And part of the reason is because it helps you to reset yourself. Okay. We can think about the cool down as almost like being preparation for the next trading session, right? If you're never going to trade again, there's no point in doing a cool down because you're done. That's it. But if you're going to trade again, likely the next day or certainly the next few days, right? Creating that cycle where you're not bringing in any emotion, you're not bringing any kind of like unclear adjustments that need to be made, right? So that writing in your journal can take on several forms, right? Again, from the technical standpoint, but from a mental standpoint, right? We want to make sure that you're creating a strong cycle of improvement. And here are a few things that I think are really important. Number one, you want to make sure that you're creating a strong cycle of improvement. And here are a few things that I think are really important. Number one, you want to make sure that you're creating a strong cycle of improvement. And here are a few things that I think are really important. Number one, you want to make sure that you're creating a strong cycle of improvement. And here are a few things that I think are really important. Number one, you want to make sure that you're creating a strong cycle of improvement. And here are a few things that I think are really important. Number one, you want to make sure that you're creating a strong cycle of improvement. And here are a few things that I think are really important. Number one, you want to make sure that you're creating a strong cycle of improvement. And here are a few things that I think are really important. Number one, you want to make sure that you're creating a strong cycle of improvement. And here are a few things that I think are really important. Number one, you want to make sure that you're creating a strong cycle of improvement. And here are a few things that I think are really important. Number one, you want to make sure that you're creating I would suggest that you can do in your journal. So some people I think struggle with it because there's just like a blank page and it's like, how'd you do? And, it can become somewhat kind of mundane. So I think when we have some questions, it can be a little bit easier. So yeah, how'd you perform? Write down what you found. What'd you learn? What was challenging? How will you be better tomorrow? And if you want other questions to ask yourself, write down other questions and you create a template that you can use as part of your post-market cooldown. But again, the key is consistency. All right, so a couple more ideas. Review your data collection worksheets. Update your maps and strategy, right? This is your opportunity. If you found new information, right, add to it so that you're better prepared tomorrow. Complete a mental hand history. On days where you're particularly emotional, right, there's a lot of emotion that was generated. Doing a mental hand history can be a way of kind of churning through that emotion and creating a release so that, yeah, there's just less emotion kind of carrying over you. Now, could you just go to sleep and go off and do whatever you want to relax and kind of blow off steam? Yes, you can, but you might learn something that gets a bit deeper, that moves you closer to resolution, that makes you more prepared. And so that's why I prefer a mental hand history here. And you don't have to complete a new one. You could just reread an existing one. Okay, but the point is we want to create some kind of release. And then, of course, you can create a plan for tomorrow. Now, next thing is like kind of during the trading hours. I know there's a lot of kind of variety that can exist here in different types of trading, right? But what I would suggest, though, is that you're looking for opportunities to take breaks, especially if you're trading, kind of the full, let's say U.S. market, and it's a long time to be focused. And so when you take breaks, we want to be more efficient at how you take those breaks. So here's what you do. Let's say it's a 5-minute break. For the first 30 seconds to the first minute, you write down just kind of whatever's on your mind. It could be templated, right? Similar to the journal that I described, or it could just be pure data dump, technically, mental, emotional, whatever. Just write down, 30 seconds to a minute, just dump it all out. Okay. Then you have 3.5 minutes, right? Where you're just completely relaxed. You're not on your phone. You're not on the computer. You're just allowing your mind to just like stop absorbing new stuff for a second. Calling a timeout, chill out, relax. Then you come back and those last 30 seconds is a mini warm-up. Review your goals, at least for the next chunk of time. Anything technical, mental that you kind of want to focus on at that period of time, and then just go, right? And so you're just creating this cycle, several times throughout the day. And what is it going to do? It's going to make you more efficient at using your energy, right? And so that will have an effect certainly later on as the day goes on, and certainly day over day, right? Greater efficiency will lead to just less likely to burn out and kind of more energy at the end of weeks. So we kind of wind all of these things together, okay? And what is the primary purpose in my mind for a routine? It's to improve your performance. However, routines are also this sort of weird intersection between performance and learning, okay? So when we're talking about creating a cycle of growth and a growth curve that can be greater, the more rigid and tight your routine is, the more consistent it is, right? And focusing on the right things to prepare you to perform better, evaluating what you did, what you learned, how you can do better tomorrow, preparing yourself for that, and then, right, execution. Because even if you don't perform as well, you're going to learn things as to why, and right, the cycle is going to get tighter and tighter, right? When you are performing, you are simultaneously learning. There's research to prove this, right? That it's almost like taking a test, and test taking imprints that knowledge to a deeper level. And so there's a high level of priority for you to be prepared to perform better, because then it's going to, like, the things that you're correcting from a mental emotional standpoint, the things that you're improving from a technical standpoint, right? Whether we're talking about particular setups or your ability to quickly interpret certain data points, or your ability to see tilt in real time and inject logic. It's like your preparation helps to encourage better execution for all of those things, which then makes it more likely for it to show up again the next time. Doesn't guarantee it, right? Because there's other factors. And so you create this cycle of added or increased growth. All right. So I want you to turn to page 20, I think it is, in your workbook. You've got a space there for you to write down just a couple improvements that you can make to your routine, right? Maybe one for your warm up, one for kind of during the trading hours, and one for your cool down. Right? I do not want you to write down a laundry list of improvements. Okay. You're not allowed to. Come up with one thing that you can do better, right, over the next 2 weeks in each of those areas, or maybe even just one in general, right? One of the biggest mistakes people make, right, is trying to do too much too quickly, right? And certainly to the question that came in earlier around this idea, okay, to be at your best, right, consistently and not have those big drop-offs, right? We want to make those points of improvement something that you can do reliably and consistently, okay? So I'm going to put kind of maybe 90 seconds on the clock. Take a couple minutes, write down the one thing that you'd add to each of your different areas, or one thing you're going to do, and post in the chat. Let's see what improvements you're going to prioritize over the next few weeks in terms of your routine.
Yep, and the clock has started.
Be consistent about actually performing my routine at the same time every day. There you go. So timing, organized daily journal, set an alarm to take breaks every hour. Perfect. More efficient breaks. Have a focus list for the day. Silence phone and turn off TV and all computer browsers. Yeah, look, I mean, some of the stuff is so simple. You probably already know that you needed to do this, but sometimes you need a little maybe kick in the ass to do it, or you need a little bit of rationale. And I do hope that you begin to treat trading as a test, right? More so, and understanding what it's going to take for you to take that test better every time, right? And yeah, it's obviously some days the test changes, but yeah, your preparation ought not to. Minimize internet surfing. Great. During break time. Yeah, exactly. Actually let your brain rest. That's so huge. You're going to be amazed at what will happen from doing that. Daily review of real-time strategy maps, structured daily journal. Fantastic. Look at tighter timeframes. Yep. Eliminating distractions, reading through mental hand histories. Yep. A couple of you saying the same thing. Prepare a watch list, written journal, but could do with reading it more. So there you go. Okay, excellent. So great stuff here. So let's move on to setting goals and making a plan. I've kind of alluded to why goal setting is so important already, but same deal. I want you to challenge you all. So just kind of post in the chat. Why do you think setting a goal, setting goals and making a plan is so important, besides it being a strategy to get what you want, and aside from it being something that narrows your focus and blocks out kind of the rest of your life. Yeah, without a goal, you'll never reach the destination. It's so. I would say technically that's not entirely true, because it actually is impossible to not have goals. The process that I'm going to kind of encourage you to do is about just being a bit more structured in the way that you're looking at your goals, so that it just becomes a bit more likely that you reach the destination that you want. A great way to see real-time progress. Small goals leads to large goals. Yep. Problem is I don't set goals. Yes, I would agree that is a problem. Measuring progress clarifies direction and intent. Framework for results helps you to focus on where you want. Plan enables you to focus. Yep, exactly. So, all right, you're all on the right page here. I'm just going to give you a couple more ideas, right? So we've talked about this already. Creates more stable motivation, especially for those tougher periods of time, right? Either outsized positive results or outsized negative results. Stuff going on in your personal life that is like you want to have a steady motivation, right? Inspiration is like a sprinter. Motivation is like the marathon runner, right? We want to have that longer lasting churning energy. We don't want to have the sprinting every single day, because you're just going to burn out. Okay. Decisions are easier to make, right? In a way, we could think about your goal setting as a way of predetermining decisions, right? So then you don't need to think about what you're going to do. You just actually have to do it. Does that guarantee you're going to do it? No. We've talked about all the reasons and all the mental and emotional reasons why that doesn't always happen, but right, it does simplify it and puts a bigger spotlight on those mental and emotional problems, and we remove motivation or lack thereof as a cause of that. Helps you dig deep, right? And to me, I think of this as kind of like an athlete. and especially when you're tired or tilted, right? When you're tired or you're a little bit emotional or something's off, right? You're just kind of digging deep to push you through to stay on the path that you've defined. And then lastly, you're better at anticipating and dealing with problems. Okay. So this is the worksheet that I use. This is part of the course as a download. It is in the course right now. Okay. Available as a PDF and as a Word doc, right? I want you to complete this before next time, send it in, and I'll be reviewing a few of these as part of the next and unfortunately final webinar. Okay, let me just kind of go through these pieces, and then I'm going to go through a couple examples just so you can see. Number one, you're going to set the result goal. Okay, so now the results are important to define. You need to know the end outcome that you're after, right? And part because then you're going to figure out how to do it, which is where the process goals come in. Why these goals matter to you. So when I just talked about like digging deep, well, this is where you get to figure out what really drives you. Okay. In a way, it's kind of like that mental hand history. It's like, okay, here's the correction. Why does that correction make sense? It adds potency to your correction. Well, here, where we're asking, why do your goals matter so much to you? It adds potency to your ability to kind of push through those key moments. Okay? And for me, I kind of found this while I was observing athletes, right? And I actually remember specifically watching Rafa Nadal play a match. I think it was either the third or fifth set. I forget. It probably was the fifth set because I generally watch just the majors. And he was up 3-1 in the fifth, and then suddenly was down 5-3. It's like, well, what's going through his mind during the changeover? And it's like, if you know tennis, that wasn't exactly when the changeover would happen. It would happen probably at 4-3. But point is, right, what's going on during the changeover? And to me, it was like kind of digging into the why. And so if we understand what that is ahead of time, well, then you can use it as almost like a different kind of injecting logic. Here, it's just like you're injecting your motivation, you're injecting your goals to help to kind of move you forward down the path rather than getting derailed, which is, you know, what he does. The next section is that process goals, right? So results determine the outcome, process figures out how you get there. They work together, right? It's not all about the process. It's not all about the journey, right? That line, right? It's all about the journey, not the destination. Bullshit, right? Not all about the results either, right? It's the two of them fit together. Problems you will likely face. And this is important because when you are more pragmatic, right, you get ahead of the game in a sense, right? You're anticipating what could derail you rather than being kind of on the defensive when it occurs. So not only are you more likely to be successful when those things happen, but two, you've already begun to kind of get your mind oriented to the idea that you need to be doing that. So if something happens that is outside of what you prepared, you're already thinking in a way that's going to help you to get past it faster than you would otherwise. All right, a couple examples here. Number one, result goal, become fully funded. 2, become always aware of my emotional state. Yes, that can be a result, right? So qualitative things can be determined as an outcome, right? Always aware of my emotional state. Very, very clear outcome. And then we figure out what the process goals are to achieve it. Executing my trading plan properly, even through periods of market chaos. Great. So why does these goals matter? Getting funded is like getting a college diploma. I'll do whatever it takes to get that stamp of approval. Okay. And there's a couple other examples. Process goals. Prepare to be at my best for every trading session. Okay. Kind of fits in. You can probably guess why it is that I chose this one. All right. How? Be ruthless about your pre-market prep. Consider it to be part of your trading plan. If you don't complete your pre-market prep correctly, you can't trade. Yes. I mean, that's pretty ruthless, pretty savage. It's going to make you take that seriously. And if you take it that seriously, how much better are you going to trade? Dump out all the accumulated emotion at the end of the trading day so I can have a clear head for the next day. How, after every trading session, write down the emotions that you're aware of that built up during the trading session. Do this after every trading session. And I would say maybe complete a mental hand history, right, if there's something new or you want some extra help doing it. Work out consistently to keep myself in good headspace throughout the week. Right. So there's some other things outside of trading. Regardless of how you feel, get up and get to the gym every day. I plan to. All right. So this top part we've already talked about. Right. Problems you will likely face. Burnout. Pretty common. How are you going to deal with it? Be aware of the early signs of burnout and adjust my schedule and do things like meditation and a relaxing evening to improve my recovery. lack of confidence. This is my biggest mental game problem. If I have several red days in a row, my confidence can take a hit. So now this we can actually use as something proactive, right? So reread my logic statements and keep my accomplishment work. Right? So the accomplishment work is just one of the techniques I use for improving confidence. Be proactive about keeping my confidence solid. And then when it's tested, there's a chance to break through. So I actually, truthfully, would probably like kind of add this to the process goals because it's the biggest mental game issue, right? It needs to be kind of much more proactively dealt with. So yeah, it's sort of identified here. But then it kind of gets put up in the process goals. And again, like this is why, we kind of work through these tools in this way, right? We're kind of asking questions that, eventually do have a bunch of overlap, right? The questions in the mental hand history have overlap to them, but when you ask each of them separately, oftentimes you get different answers. And so then that helps you to discover or uncover another piece of the puzzle. And in this case here, we're discovering another piece of what needs to be prioritized on a day-to-day basis, not just when a lack of confidence would pop up. Okay. Here's another example. It's a little bit smaller, so fit it on one page. All right. Result goal. Become completely process oriented. Execute the trades according to my rules. Do not deviate. Do not get hijacked from hope or overconfidence. Okay. Very clear outcome, and you can measure it. Enjoy my job. Enjoy trading. Enjoy the preparation routine. Enjoy putting in and managing the trades without the stress and frustration. Why do these matter? After all these years, I need to reach consistency. I'm fed up with the emotional roller coaster, and I want to enjoy what I do. I want to spend the year focusing on execution, not on P&L. And this is coming from a trader that's really beginning to kind of get into some solid momentum here, and it's taken a bunch of work. I mean, I think we've been working together for about 16 months now. And I'm not saying we're working all the time, but we're talking fairly regularly. And first 8 months was really about getting to the roots of all these issues, but now is in a spot where they can really kind of take things to the next level from an execution standpoint. Okay, and so you can read through these other goals and problems they will likely face. Okay. All right, so just to kind of cover, goals, like any other area of the mental game, can have flaws in it. And so here are a handful of the ones that I most commonly see. Okay, expecting too much too quickly. Okay, we've heard this, right? I added it today in one of the mental hand histories, right? Expecting too much too quickly. You're pushing down on your progress with too much intensity. And so it's like, again, trying to lift that weight and somebody's actually forcing the bar down on you. So now you're not just trying to lift the weight, you're trying to lift down an added force. So yes, expecting too much too quickly can be a catalyst for not just motivational issues, but also, any of the other mental game issues as well. Dreams unconnected from reality, no short-term goals. So yes, I want you to dream as big as you want. I have still dreams to win the US Open. Okay. Am I delusional? Maybe. I don't know. I don't care though. I'm realistic about what it's going to take. I'm realistic about how big the gap is between, my game currently and winning the US Open. In fact, I would not want to tee it up in the US Open right now because I would shoot $1 billion. But the point is, the dreams are cool. I mean, I have no problem with them. The problem I have is when they're disconnected from reality and you don't have short-term goals, you don't have short-term plans and how you're going to make those reasonable steps forward. And so what happens, right? When there is, down days and struggles and mistakes and failures, right? All of a sudden it feels like you're just like losing connection to your dreams and they're just gone. It's like, no, they're not gone. You're dealing with the normal fluctuations of what it takes to actually get there, but you can't see it that way because all you see is this. Okay. So that practicality becomes really, really important to maintain that stability in your work. No process goals. So it's only about the results. I mean, it's a pretty common problem in a profession in a field like trading. Too many goals. Kind of alluded to this when it came to routines, right? So if you're trying to do too much, you're actually going to do less. I've only had one client in my 17 years who like consciously went against my advice here and said, you know what? No, I'm not going to do one thing. I'm going to do 5 things. And I understand it's going to be slower and it's going to be a pain in the butt. So we will never know like what it would have looked like had he listened to me, but he was successfully able to move all 5 things forward, but man, it was chaotic and it was hard to manage. he did it. I mean, it took like months to see like really tangible progress, but I'm not saying you can't do this. I'm just saying you're going to add a lot of complexity and difficulty, and just be ready for that if that's what you're going to choose. And then failing to set new goals actually is a shockingly common problem, even amongst institutional traders. I had a conversation a couple months ago about a guy who had a really rough 2021 after having like banner 2020. And so he didn't even realize that this was the problem. It was like literally this simple. Struggled for like 7 months without getting in touch with me, which is not uncommon. And yeah, it was just that simple. It's like, dude, yeah, you didn't reset your count. It was like you did not go through and set very clear goals for 2021, knowing full well how good 2020 was and like what was reasonable here. And yeah, maybe I've gotten a little ahead of myself, and it's just so common. Okay. So let's go through a quick recap here. I think in general, you kind of know my feelings about with the strategic reminder and the maps and the mental hand histories. Like in general, I see lots of progression. I'm very, very happy about that. I'm just going to keep continuing to push you to make those distinctions with the strategic reminder, right? So it is purely technical or closer to injecting logic, purely mental, right? For the reasons I've outlined. From a mental hand history standpoint, right? I think the biggest kind of point of improvement is trying to pull out more of the technical stuff and focus more on the mental stuff. You can do mental hand histories for the technical stuff, and that will be correct and that will help you. But if the bigger like kind of cause of your mistakes is the mental, you got to be looking at and prioritizing the stuff that you're writing that is more mentally oriented. And if it's hard because you're not good at it, then cool. Embrace it, accept it, deal with it. Don't escape it and just go with what's safe. And then as far as the A to C game analysis goes, I think in general, right, just keep those A game, B game, C game distinctions as clear as you can, and just keep working on it. All right, so improving your routine. Routines help you to be at your best more often. All right, routines help you to be more efficient. Routines help you to take the test and to take the test better each time around, right? And that's going to add to your progression, and the cycle just gets tighter and tighter and tighter. Okay. So what are you going to do? You're going to make one improvement, either to your routine as a whole or to each part of your routine. And then eventually, not in the next few weeks, you're going to look closer at ways of optimizing and being at your best more often. Okay. As far as setting goals and making a plan, right? So set results and process goals, right? They fit together. They are not distinct things. And then define what derails you is going to lower the risk of it actually occurring. So over the next, let's say 10 days, right, until Wednesday, was that the June 1st? Is that that Wednesday? Yeah,
I think it is June 1st.
Yeah. So Wednesday, June 1st, right, is the deadline to send in your goals and your plan, and I will review them next time. So yeah, go through a draft, and then go through a finalization of it. And if you want to send me your draft because you're struggling to kind of get through it, that's fine. All right, y'all. I will get to your questions in a minute, but if you could first just mention in the chat, what was your biggest takeaway from today? Any additional improvements to your map or your real-time strategy? Any additional improvements you think you can make to your mental hand history? Updates to your routine or the goal setting and planning for problems process. Right, and so I will get to your questions. I see there are still a chunk of them here. By all means, if you want to post a few more questions, I will get to them, and obviously I'll stick around and answer all of them. I got a few extra minutes today, not quite as tight on timing. Just kind of looking at some of the comments here, putting it all together, seeing it all kind of completely looping together. That's great. Routine and goal setting was not doing either. Great. Diving deeper into the map, improvements in C game, like the trauma part. Cool. Yeah, I didn't mention that it was one, but yeah, you're right. I think the trauma thing could be key for many of you. Routines getting even better, reinforcing and how it all ties together. Another one addressing the trauma, and yeah, making the mental history, a bit tighter here. So, all right, good stuff, everybody. Well, let's get to some questions here. Could you comment on the slippery slope of breaking and bending rules? Seems like a small crack in the dam can lead to a flood. Yeah. So we can think about all the bad habits all the things that happen on the other side when that dam cracks as being stuff that you're really great at, right? Skills and habits that are, you've just well-worn patterns. So that's the stuff that is most likely to occur. And so once that first domino falls, once that crack opens, then it's inevitable that you're just going to kind of cram through it. So I just think in the short term, you just can't criticize yourself for that dynamic being the case, right? And just continue to step back and better understand what the heck is happening. A. B, maybe, right, there are signs and signals of cracks that you aren't seeing yet. And so the first crack you see is actually bigger than you realize. So continuing to look back. But in the long run, right, we're not looking for perfection in the short term. We're looking for sort of a steady kind of increase in your ability to reduce the severity of it once things break. So I'll give you like an example, that is both personal, and I've talked with clients about it too, because, health and nutrition is important. And so what happens when, you start eating junk food? And for me, there's been times where I've been an emotional eater, right? And so bad day, long day, tired, exhausted, whatever. And so, I'm just going to, eat stuff that I know that I don't want to. And so what's the answer in that spot? It's like, all right, well, if I was going to have 5 cookies, can I have 3? Right? It's just how much can you suck less, right, in those moments? And I promise you, if you have that mentality in that moment, right, it kind of allows you to have a little bit of your cake and eat it too, right? You can kind of get both, right? But then over time, you're going to prioritize more and more about why you don't need it, why it's flawed and unnecessary. One of the things that helped me was realizing that I was actually like choosing pain. I'm not a masochist, right? And yet subconsciously I was choosing to kind of like put myself in a compromised situation because I'm going to sleep worse. I know that. I've actually got here, data tracker. I've got data to prove that I sleep worse when I eat poorly. I've got data to prove my workouts are worse. I've got data to prove that my golf game is going to tend to be worse too. So why would I choose to put myself under that? It's like, it just in that moment, I'm not realizing the full consequences. So sometimes the injection that you need in those moments is to connect the consequences of your actions to the choices that you're making at that time. Because in that moment, you're so kind of myopic in what's going on that you're not sort of seeing the bigger picture, right? Now, you could certainly do that and then still have the, I don't care, I'm going to do it anyway, right? And that can be like the early phase. And I certainly went through that too with, it's like, no, I'm still going to eat these 5 cookies and I'm still going to have a stomach ache and I'm still going to feel in pain. It's like that, that's what I'm choosing in that moment. Now, but I'm only doing that, right, because I had not fully understood the emotion and the fatigue that was kind of evident in those moments. So, all right. Somebody's asking about my work with the liege and the parallels between esports and trading. I'm not going to get into the specifics of that, but parallels between esports and trading is as high as it is everywhere else. The difference is that, in most of the esports, the variance is not quite as high as it is in trading. Yes, for sure, there's a lot of variance in esports. I think PUBG has a ton of it. CSGO has a little bit less. League of Legends has quite a lot less. So, and yes, I am surprised that I know that much about esports. I certainly would not have thought that, many years ago, but I certainly probably wouldn't have said that about trading. No, I probably would have. I think poker, esports, way, way less likelihood that I would get into it. But trading, I've been involved in, the market since I was 13. Okay. In your wording on the mental hand history version 2 trauma, you used some different questions. Could you repeat or clarify what the different questions are to ask? Yes. Let me go back to my notes on that just so I know it perfectly. All right. So step 1, you're going to describe the problem as it exists, right? The pain that sort of existed in the past that you still feel now, right? And then step number 2 is to describe like why it makes sense that you're still holding on to that pain. How specific should result goals be? Shouldn't we use SMART technique, or do you leave that for the process goals? I've looked at the SMART technique a while ago. I don't recall what it is offhand, truthfully. For me, from a performance standpoint, I just liked the construction that I had. So can you use the SMART technique? Of course. I mean, from a goal setting standpoint, there's a lot of things that are out there. So I don't by any means profess to have the only way to go about setting goals. And certainly there's enough diversity there. So this task, like the goal setting process, yeah, if you want to come up with your own or use other techniques, by all means, go for it. I always struggle with goal setting. Is there a process you follow, not just the writing of the sheet? Yeah, I mean, I think the first one you want to do is just really take a step back and think about what the heck you want, right? And I think when you start to do that, it will kind of force you to zoom in to some specifics. So when I work with trading clients on this, I think the easiest one that comes up at the beginning is I want to make a lot of money, or I want to make X amount of money, or I want to become a funded trader. I want to reach this level. I want to become one of the best ever. I want best in the world, whatever it is, right? Something that's very, very kind of surface level, but still viable. I mean, that can be it. But then when you start to kind of think more about, all right, well, why do I want that? And then it starts to tap into other dimensions to yourself and why this thing even matters to you. And it's, well, I want to retire, and I want to retire quickly. And so, okay, maybe there's a little bit of flaw there, right? As I mentioned, or no, I'd say actually the challenge is what I really love. And so like setting my goals really, really high is not about the number per se. It's really about being challenged. And so then if it's really about being challenged, then you almost need to kind of make that a much more like kind of intimate part of your process. I think one of the things, certainly I'd say more of the institutional traders that I've worked with that have struggled is that like it's just sort of easy to be very, very kind of P&L and outcome focused because the org with which they're operating in is that way. And so the sort of like being challenged gets lost, and yet it's the thing that actually drives them day to day, right? But they're not connected to it. They're not aware of it. So yeah, like kind of peeling back the layers of what drives you, what motivates you is really kind of what the beginning process of this goal setting is really all about. And I think if you go through, each of the different sections, you think about, all right, what are my process goals? What are my problems? And you look at it just a bit messy, right? Which is fine, right? You're going to see that things are going to kind of overlap, and it just gives you a chance to once again pull a lot of things out of your head, put it down on paper in a way like you're putting together puzzle pieces, right? And it's just going to become a lot easier to do that versus having it just kind of all in your head. It is impossible for you not to have goals. It's impossible for you not to be motivated. The question is like, how efficient, how focused is all that? And that's what the goal setting process is really all about. Goals should be measured over time or daily. I'll say both. Right? I mean, I think you want to have things that are slimmed down so you have a clear idea of what you're trying to do day to day, and then, but you're also seeing like how well you're actually kind of progressing towards your bigger picture goals. Right? And you don't have to have goals that are 2 to 5 years from now. And I think having like a monthly time horizon would be like kind of the minimum longer term goal that I would look for. But you certainly can go out farther too. Okay. How long should a pre-market routine be? 15 minutes. Some suggestions or examples of too little or too much would be helpful also for post-market. I think a pre-market routine from a mental standpoint that is more than 20 minutes starts to get excessive. It suggests to me that you're kind of trying to squeeze too much, almost like you're trying to cram for a test, right? And it's like, no, this is not about cramming. If you really need to study your maps and patterns, et cetera, and mental analysis, like you need to do that outside of your pre-market warm-up. Your warm-up should just be a refresher, right? For me in this presentation, right? If I did all of the work just in the minutes before this thing, I would have been up at, 1 a.m. So yeah, 20 minutes, I'm going to say kind of hard cap. 10 to 15 minutes, probably pretty reasonable average. 1 to 3 minutes would be like kind of the minimum. And for some people, that's fine. Post-market, you can go a little bit longer. I would say on particularly emotional days, it should be longer. The problem is, right, usually it's the opposite. Usually it's the like, get me the F out of here. The last thing I want to do is think about, all the blood. And yet that's actually when you need to spend more time and just capture the data that happened. You don't have to go through and do mental analysis. I'm not saying you've got to pour through them and I force you to do it. No. Capture the details, capture the data, and then you'll be able to deal with a lot better in the future. All right. Earlier, you stated my issue with was confidence. So, what can I do to strengthen it outside of the system you have laid out? Because these confidence issues mostly arise after hours. I think I can't give you more advice here until you better understand what the heck is going on back there. So, do mental hand histories or A1, and try to figure out what's going on, and then send that in next time. Can you go an overview of the link among A to C game, set goals and routines and strategic an answer for each, but I would like a connection during the trading day through the three of them. Okay. So A to C game analysis provides you real-time feedback on your performance if you want it, or it can be a way to grade yourself at the end. Setting goals and routines, right? That's a kind of bigger picture, right? Preparation after hours, during market hours, it's kind of what you're doing. So, I mean, you could rate your performance in how well you perform your routines, and that could be part of your A to C game. Sure. But those two things are not necessarily linked. The real-time strategic, the map and the real-time strategy, right? That is your way of executing the sort of mental game strategy to avoid your big trading mistakes. And so, yes, that can be connected to the A to C game, and it certainly can be one of your goals. Okay. I find it hard to set a goal with a time frame in the markets because I'm afraid of kind of derailing just because I would be obsessed on the deadline or the result and forcing bad trades. And then if I don't put a deadline, I feel I may not be working as focused as I could be. Any suggestions? Yes. So not putting a deadline is your way of band-aiding and managing the obsessiveness that comes up. So you need to actually do a mental hand history on the obsessiveness around a deadline. Right? What's going on? Right? I mean, I would imagine there's probably some confidence stuff for you there. Okay. But that's what you want to focus on. We don't want to just kind of band-aid these issues, right? This is another example of managing a problem. You're managing a problem by not having a deadline, but then that causes problems too, as it would if you were walking around with a cast and you don't actually need it anymore. Or in this case, you do need a cast, but you don't actually know what the break is. How are you tracking it? Data on eating poorly or sleeping worse. So this is called WHOOP, spelled WHOOP. So this one has been fairly popularized within golf, but I've seen a number of different clients using it. So far for me, it's the one that I found to be the most effective for recovery, and that's kind of where I use it most. It's kind of it's a sleep tracker. You wear it 24/7, and it gives you data on your heart rate variability, which has been a marker for recovery that triathletes have used for a number of years. I'm not a triathlete, but I mean, I can tell you on days where I was eating poorly, my heart rate variability is way lower, even if I get the same amount of sleep, than on days where I've eaten properly. It's crazy. And so, that's been a very helpful thing to kind of illuminate. Also, just some kind of poor sleep hygiene. Like I would kind of procrastinate getting to sleep and, be on my phone sometimes or just be watching TV. And, it's like, all right, like I'm tired. I really should not watch the end of this episode, but it's really good. So it's kind of hard to turn off. And just like kind of managing some of that, understanding that if I don't turn it off, I'm like choosing to make tomorrow worse. And with the things that I want to accomplish, then I'm choosing to slow down my growth curve. And, some things, especially like around golf tournaments or things like this, right? There are firm deadlines. And so if I'm performing poorly, like I am actually just shooting myself in the foot. And so it just makes it a little bit easier to choose the right things there. All right. A couple more questions here. Suggestions on tracking sleep. I don't have a ton of them. All right. Like you say, I think that would be the one I suggest. The other one that people use is called Aura. It's OURA. It's a ring that goes on your finger. Some have found that one to be more accurate from a sleep tracking standpoint than Whoop. I mean, they're the two best. Play around with them. I don't think either of them are perfect. Okay, I think we're still several generations away from that. But again, I think it's just helpful as a general guide. Goal setting, how to differentiate between objective, right, increasing account value versus subjective follow process. So think of the result as what you want. The process is how are you going to get it? what emotions can I plug to prioritize process over, what positive emotions can I plug in to prioritize process over P&L? Is it removed from my screens? It is removed from my screens, but is it possible to ignore as my brain is constantly calculating? Right. I think it's not emotions, it's feedback, right? That's, again, the purpose of the A to C game analysis is to provide you feedback to know how you're doing. You need feedback, and you've just defaulted to P&L because it's easy and common. But spend the time creating an A to C game analysis, and you'll give yourself the ability to get real-time feedback, and you'll be able to. Okay. Okay, and so desktop mentioning the confidence issues you sent to me on Wednesday. So, yeah, I would say maybe send an email again, and I'll make sure to prioritize it for the next webinar. Or if you want to call out any additions that you want to look at, then do a slight revision. But yes, make sure you just kind of call it out for me when you submit it again through the Trader Lion course right there. All right. Yeah, I think that's a good spot for us to end here, folks. 25 minutes over, lots of good questions. Look, we're kind of racing towards the finish line here. You got 2 more weeks. We are going to prioritize your questions next time, okay, in terms of necessarily reviewing more materials. I want to make sure that the things we are focused on is going to firmly give you a feeling and to be in a position where you're going to be able to feel confident that you'll be able to continue to make progress. So whatever you feel like you need, whatever questions you feel like you need answers, right? Make sure that you ask them, send them in advance, right? And I will prioritize, the construction of the next webinar to make sure that, when we say goodbye, we're saying goodbye, knowing that you've got a system in place that's going to carry you forward. All right, everybody.
Yeah, just along those lines, just as Jared said, we're going to be kind of prompting you for questions. I think we'll send out an email Wednesday or Thursday, specifically asking for any kind of lingering questions you have. So be on the lookout for that. And with that said, thank you guys again for the great interaction, great questions today as well. And yeah, let's close it out strong in 2 weeks from now. Thanks, guys.
Take care. Bye-bye.